Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Rebecca Stonehart, and I've never told anyone this story from '82. Not my supervisors, not the investigators, not even the therapist they made me see afterward. But subscribers, after 43 years of carrying this weight, I need to tell someone what really happened in those mountains. February 1982. I was 38 years old and had spent 12 years as a wildlife ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains. People think that job is all beautiful sunsets and helping lost hikers, but mostly it's hard work and terrible weather. That winter was the worst I'd ever seen. An ice storm hit Tennessee so hard it knocked out power across 3 counties and turned every road into a skating rink. I grew up hearing stories from my Cherokee grandmother about the old days, about spirits that lived in these mountains. She'd tell me about the Wendigo, a creature born from starvation and cannibalism that hunted humans. I never believed any of it. I had a biology degree. I knew the scientific names for every animal in these woods. Monsters weren't real. I should have listened to my grandmother. The call came through on February 14th around 9 in the morning. Our emergency radio crackled to life, the only thing still working since the ice brought down most of the phone lines. A family named Mitchell had driven up to their cabin 2 weeks earlier, before the storm hit. Now they were trapped. The father said they were running out of food. He sounded scared. My partner Maria Santos and I were the only rangers within 60 miles. Maria was 32, tough as nails, with medical training that had saved lives before. She grew up in these mountains too, like me. We'd worked together for 5 years, and I trusted her more than anyone. "We should wait for the roads to clear," Maria said, looking out at the ice-covered trees. "It's too dangerous." "They've been up there for 2 weeks," I replied. "If they're calling us, they're desperate." The Mitchell cabin sat deep in Cades Cove, a valley that had been Cherokee hunting ground centuries ago. My grandmother told me that during the Trail of Tears in 1838, families had starved to death in these woods. She said their hunger never left. It soaked into the ground, waiting. We loaded our packs with supplies and headed out on snowshoes. The temperature was 15 degrees. Our breath came out in white clouds. The hike should have taken 4 hours, but the ice made everything harder and slower. About an hour in, I noticed something wrong. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. In 12 years, I'd never heard the mountains this quiet. Even in deep winter, there's always some sound. A woodpecker, a crow, something. But this was different. This was the kind of silence that made your ears ring. "You hear that?" I asked Maria. "I don't hear anything," she said. "Exactly." My GPS unit started acting strange too. The elevation readings kept jumping around, showing impossible numbers. 1 minute, we were at 2,000 feet. The next, it said we were at 500 feet, even though we were climbing uphill. I shook it, thinking the cold had damaged it. 2 hours into the hike, we found the deer. It was lying in the snow about 20 feet off the trail. At first, I thought it had just died from starvation. That happened sometimes in hard winters. But when we got closer, my stomach turned. The deer had been skinned. Not by a hunter or even a predator. Someone had peeled the hide off while the animal was still alive. I could tell by the way the legs were positioned, it had been struggling. All the meat was gone from its body. Just bones and a few scraps of muscle remained. "Bear?" Maria asked, but her voice said she didn't believe it. "Bears don't skin their food," I said. "And they're hibernating, right? Now, anyway." The tracks around the deer were wrong, too. They started out looking like boot prints, human boot prints. But then they changed. The prints got longer, the toes spread out, and the stride increased. It looked like something had walked up as a person and left as an animal. "Mountain lion?" Maria tried again. I wanted to agree. I wanted to find a rational explanation. But in 12 years of tracking wildlife, I'd never seen anything like this. We kept moving. We had to. The Mitchell family needed help. The wrongness got worse the closer we got to the cabin. The tracks we were following, mostly covered by fresh snow but still visible, didn't make sense. They wove back and forth across the trail like whatever made them couldn't walk straight. Sometimes they disappeared entirely for 20 or 30 feet, like something had jumped. The sun was starting to set when we finally saw the cabin through the trees. It sat in a small clearing, smoke coming from the chimney. That should have been a good sign. It meant they had heat, but the front door was gone, not open. Gone, like something had torn it completely off the hinges from the inside and thrown it into the yard. It lay 20 feet away in the snow, covered in scratch marks. Maria and I stopped at the edge of the clearing. My heart was pounding. "Hello?" I called out. "Mr. Mitchell? This is the Park Service. We got your call." Nothing. Just that awful silence. "Maybe they went for help themselves," Maria said. But she didn't move forward either. I pulled my radio. Dead. The batteries were fresh that morning, but now it wouldn't even turn on. We had to go inside. It was our job. But everything in my body was screaming at me to run. I pulled my flashlight and stepped into the clearing. Maria followed close behind, her hand on the pepper spray we carried for aggressive animals. The snow around the cabin was disturbed. Lots of footprints, all of them strange and wrong like the ones we'd seen on the trail. The cabin was small, just 2 rooms and a basement. Rich people from Knoxville owned it. They'd come, up here to get away from the city, to feel like pioneers for a weekend. The Mitchells were renting it for a month. Mr. Mitchell was a lawyer. His wife taught high school. They had 2 kids, twin girls, 8 years old. I reached the doorway and shined my light inside. The front room was destroyed. The couch was flipped over. The table was on its side. Chairs were broken into pieces. But that's not what made my blood run cold. There were bite marks everywhere. Someone had chewed on the wooden furniture, on the chair legs, on the table, on the door frame. I could see the teeth marks clearly. Human teeth, not animal teeth. And there was blood. Not a lot, but enough. Dark stains on the floor, smeared on the walls. "Jesus," Maria whispered behind me. We stepped inside carefully. The fire in the stone fireplace was still burning, which meant someone had added wood recently. The room smelled bad, like meat that had been left out too long, mixed with something else I couldn't identify. Something sweet and rotten at the same time. "Park Service," I called out again. "We're here to help." A sound came from upstairs. A soft thump, like something heavy falling over. Maria and I looked at each other. She pulled out her pepper spray. I grabbed the tire iron from my pack, the closest thing I had to a weapon. We moved to the stairs. They were wooden and creaky. Each step sounded like a gunshot in the silence. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was just the cold. Upstairs was one big room with 4 beds. The Mitchells had set it up nice. Quilts on each bed, stuffed animals for the girls, books stacked on a nightstand. But now everything was torn apart. The mattresses had been ripped open. Stuffing was scattered everywhere. The quilts were shredded. And there was more blood up here. A lot more. It was splattered on the walls in a pattern that made me think of those crime shows on TV. Someone had been hurt badly. The blood led to the corner of the room where it pooled on the floor and then stopped, like whoever had been bleeding just disappeared. "Rebecca," Maria said, softly. She was looking at something on the floor. It was a child's shoe, small, pink. There was blood on it. My chest got tight. "We need to search the whole house." We went back downstairs. The kitchen was worse than the front room. Every cabinet was open. Food containers were torn apart and scattered across the floor. But here's what got me. They hadn't eaten most of the food. Cans of soup sat unopened. A package of crackers was ripped open, but the crackers were all over the floor, not eaten. Whoever had been in here was looking for something specific. The refrigerator door hung open. Inside was empty except for some condiments. But on the floor in front of it, I found something that made my stomach turn. Fingernails. Human fingernails. 5 of them, torn off and lying in a small pile. There was dried blood around them. "Maria," I said. My voice came out strange and high. "We need to leave. Right now. We need to get help and come back with—" A howl cut me off. It came from below us, from the basement. It wasn't a human sound, but it wasn't an animal either. It was something in between, high and broken and full of hunger. The sound went on, rising and falling, until my teeth hurt from it. Maria grabbed my arm. Her face was white. What the hell was that? The howl stopped. In the silence that followed, we heard footsteps, slow, heavy, coming up the basement stairs. The basement door was in the kitchen. It was closed. We watched it. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. The footsteps stopped right on the other side of the door. "Hello?" A man's voice called out. It sounded weak, sick. "Is someone there? Please, we need help." It was Mr. Mitchell. It had to be. But something about his voice was wrong. It was too flat, like he was reading words off a paper. "Mr. Mitchell?" I called back. "It's the Park Service. Are you hurt?" "Yes, hurt. Very hurt. Please, come down. I can't climb the stairs." Maria shook her head at me. Her eyes said, "Don't you dare open that door." "Why don't you come up here, Mr. Mitchell?" I said. "We have medical supplies." Silence. Then, I can't. Too weak. Please. My family needs help." "Where's your wife? Where are your daughters?" Another long silence. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was deeper, rougher. "They're down here, with me. We're all down here. Come down. Come see." Every instinct I had said this was wrong. This was a trap. But we were rangers. It was our job to help people. And if his family was really down there, if those little girls were hurt or dying. I put my hand on the doorknob. It was ice cold. "Rebecca, don't," Maria whispered. I turned the knob and pulled. The door opened about 3 inches, then stopped. Something was blocking it from the other side. But in those 3 inches, I could see down into the darkness of the basement. And I could see eyes. They were huge, too big for any human face. And they were black, not just the pupils, but the whole eye. Black, like deep water. They stared up at me without blinking. "Come down," the voice said. But this time it didn't sound like Mr. Mitchell at all. It sounded like rocks grinding together. "Come down and see what hunger makes us." I slammed the door shut and jumped back. My heart was trying to punch through my ribs. "We're leaving," I said. "Now." We ran for the front door. But before we got there, we heard something that stopped us in our tracks. Crying. A child crying. It was coming from outside, from somewhere in the woods behind the cabin. "Help me," a little girl's voice called out. "Please help me. It ate my sister. It ate Amy. Please don't let it eat me too." Maria looked at me with horror in her eyes. "Alex," she whispered. That was one of the twins' names. We'd seen it on the emergency call paperwork. But the crying got louder, more desperate. "Please, I'm so cold. I can't feel my feet." I wanted to run toward that voice more than I'd ever wanted anything. Every part of me said, "Save that child." But I'd spent 12 years in these woods. I knew that sometimes animals learn to make sounds that attract prey. Birds that mimic human voices. Foxes that sound like babies crying. And now I knew that some things were worse than animals. "It's not her," I said to Maria. "It can't be. But what if it is?" We stood frozen in that destroyed cabin, listening to a little girl beg for her life. And I had to make a choice. I made the wrong choice. "Stay here," I told Maria. "Keep your pepper spray ready. If I'm not back in 5 minutes, run for the trail." "Rebecca, no!" But I was already moving. I went out the back door into the darkening woods. The crying was coming from behind a stand of pine trees about 50 yards away. My flashlight beam cut through the shadows, but it felt weak and small. "Alex," I called out. "I'm a ranger. I'm here to help you." The crying stopped. I stopped too. The silence crashed down again. Then I saw her. She was standing between 2 trees, wearing a nightgown that was too thin for this weather. Her feet were bare. Her blonde hair hung down over her face. She wasn't moving. "Alex?" I took a step closer. "Are you okay, honey?" Her head tilted to the side. Too far. At an angle that would break a neck. "Cold," she said. But it wasn't a child's voice. It was that same grinding rock voice from the basement. So cold. So hungry. The little girl's body jerked, like someone had pulled strings attached to her arms and legs. She took a step toward me, then another. Her movements were all wrong, too stiff, too fast. I backed up. "Stay there, don't come any closer," she giggled. It was the most horrible sound I'd ever heard. A child's laugh twisted into something broken and sharp. "You smell good." Like fear, like meat that knows it's going to be eaten. I turned and ran. Behind me I heard her running too, but she wasn't running like a child. She whistled, as running like an animal, on all fours, impossibly fast. I could hear her breathing, wet and raspy and hungry. I burst through the back door of the cabin. "Maria! Go, go, go!" Maria didn't ask questions. We ran for the front door together. But something moved in front of it, blocking our way. It was Mr. Mitchell. At least it had been Mr. Mitchell once. He stood 7 feet tall now. His body was stretched out and thin, like someone had pulled him on a rack. His skin was gray and hung loose on his bones. But worst of all was his face. His jaw had extended forward. His teeth had grown long and sharp. His eyes were completely black, and he was eating his own arm. He held his left arm up with his right hand and bit into it, tearing off chunks of flesh and swallowing them without chewing. Blood ran down his chin. He didn't seem to feel any pain. He just kept eating. When he saw us, he stopped. He dropped his arm, which was now just bone from the elbow down, and smiled. His teeth were red. "Ranger Stoneheart," he said. His voice was almost normal now, almost human. "Do you know what it's like to be so hungry that you'd eat yourself? Do you know what it feels like when hunger becomes who you are?" "Maria," I whispered. "The kitchen. Back door." But before we could move, Mrs. Mitchell came up from the basement. She looked even worse than her husband. She was crawling on the ceiling, her arms and legs bent backward at the joints. Her head hung down and her hair dragged on the floor. She had been eating something down in the basement. Her whole face was covered in blood. We were trapped between them. "You should have stayed away," Mrs. Mitchell said. Her voice sounded sad, almost sorry. "We tried to warn you. We tried to call for help before it was too late. But now we're so hungry, and you're here, and we can't stop ourselves." Mr. Mitchell took a step toward us. The Cherokee knew about this curse. They knew what happens when people eat human flesh to survive. The hunger never stops. It grows. It changes you. You become the Wendigo. "We didn't want to," Mrs. Mitchell whispered from the ceiling. "We held out as long as we could, but we ran out of food. We were starving, and the girls stopped crying after the first week. They were so quiet, so still, and we were so hungry." Maria grabbed my hand. I could feel her shaking. "We ate them," Mr. Mitchell said. "We ate our daughters, and now we can't stop eating. We ate each other. I ate Susan's fingers. She ate my toes. But it's never enough. The hunger just gets worse." The thing that used to be Mr. Mitchell moved faster than anything human could move. 1 second he was by the door. The next second he had Maria by the throat. She screamed and sprayed him with pepper spray. It should have blinded him. It should have made him let go. But he just smiled and lifted her off the ground. I pulled the tire iron from my belt and swung it as hard as I could. I hit him in the side of the head with a sound like hitting a watermelon. His head snapped to the side, but he didn't let go of Maria. Mrs. Mitchell dropped from the ceiling behind me. I felt her cold hands grab my shoulders. Her breath on my neck smelled like rotten meat. "Don't fight," she whispered in my ear. "It only hurts for a moment. Then you'll be hungry too. Then you'll understand." I drove my elbow back into her stomach. She made a sound like air leaving a balloon and let go. I spun around and hit her with the tire iron. She fell back. Maria was still struggling in Mr. Mitchell's grip. Her face was turning purple. I hit him again. And again. And again. I hit him until the tire iron was bent and his head was caved in on one side. He dropped Maria and turned to look at me. Blood was running down his ruined face, but he was still smiling. "You can't kill hunger," he said. Then he jumped at me. I fell backward and he landed on top of me. His weight drove the air from my lungs. His mouth opened impossibly wide. Could see down his throat, see something moving in there, something that wasn't him anymore. He bit down on my shoulder. The pain was like nothing I'd ever felt. Like being struck by lightning. Like having acid poured into my veins. I screamed. But worse than the pain was the feeling that came after it. A horrible, gnawing emptiness opened up inside me. I suddenly understood what they meant. I was hungry. So hungry. The hunger was everything. It was all I could think about. I looked at Maria, who was gasping on the floor, trying to breathe. And for just a second, just one terrible second, I thought about how good she would taste. Then Maria started singing. It was a Cherokee death song. My grandmother had taught it to me when I was little. Maria must have learned it too. The words were about releasing spirits, about letting go of the world, about accepting the end. Mr. Mitchell shrieked and let go of me. He covered his ears and stumbled backward. Mrs. Mitchell fell from where she'd been climbing the wall. Both of them were making horrible sounds. "Keep singing," I yelled at Maria. She sang louder. I joined in, even though my shoulder was on fire and the hunger was screaming in my head. We sang that death song like it was the last thing we'd ever do. The Mitchells started to change. Their stretched-out bodies began to shrink. Their gray skin got darker. For just a moment, they looked almost human again. Mr. Mitchell's face twisted with pain and sadness. "Thank you," he whispered. Then both of them collapsed on the floor and didn't move. Maria and I looked at each other. We were both crying. My shoulder was bleeding badly. The bite mark was deep and shaped like a crescent moon. "We need to go," Maria said. Her voice was hoarse from singing. "Before—" A small voice came from the darkness of the basement. "Mommy? Daddy?" We both froze. That sounded like a real child. Not a grinding rock voice. Not the thing pretending to be Alex. A real little girl. "Please," the voice called out. "I'm scared. Why won't you answer me?" Maria started toward the basement door. I grabbed her arm. "No," I said. "It's a trick. Remember the voice outside." "But what if it's really her? What if one of the twins is still alive down there?" We stared at the basement door. Every second felt like an hour. "Amy," Maria called out. "Alex, this is the Park Service. We're going to get you out of there, okay?" "Maria's here?" the voice said. It sounded happy, relieved. "I remember you. You came to our school last year. You taught us about bears." Maria's face went white. "I did teach at their school. How would it know that?" "Because it ate their memories along with their bodies," I said. The hunger in my stomach was getting worse. I could feel it spreading through my whole body like poison. "We need to leave, now, before I can't control myself." But Maria was already opening the basement door. "I have to know. I have to see. Maria, don't—" She went down the stairs. I heard her gasp. Then she started screaming. I ran to the top of the stairs and looked down. The basement was full of bones, human bones. They covered the floor like carpet, and in the middle of them, something was eating Maria. It looked like both of the Mitchell twins merged together. 2 heads, 4 arms, 1 body. It had been hiding in the dark, waiting. And now it had Maria on the ground, and it was tearing into her stomach with its teeth. Maria's screams turned to wet gurgles. She reached up toward me with one hand. Her eyes were begging me to help her, but I couldn't. The hunger in me was too strong now. And I knew if I went down there, I wouldn't be saving Maria. I'd be eating her too. I ran. I got about 30 feet from the cabin before I heard the thing coming after me. It wasn't just the twin creature. All three of them were following me now. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell had gotten back up, and the merged twins were crawling out of the basement. They were making sounds like wolves howl it. Inang, but wrong, twisted, full of endless hunger. My shoulder was bleeding badly. Every step sent lightning through my body. But worse than the pain was the hunger. It had spread from my stomach to my chest, to my arms, to my head. I could feel it changing me. My teeth felt loose in my gums. My fingers were stretching. I was becoming one of them. The woods were almost completely dark now. My flashlight was back in the cabin. I was running blind through the trees, stumbling over roots, crashing through branches. Behind me, I could hear them getting closer. They could see in the dark. They could smell me. They knew exactly where I was. I tripped over a fallen log and went down hard. My face hit the snow. For a second, I just lay there, tasting blood in my mouth. The hunger told me to bite my own tongue, to eat any piece of myself I could reach. I got to my knees. The three creatures came out of the darkness around me. They moved in a circle, surrounding me. Their black eyes reflected the little bit of moonlight that came through the clouds. "You're one of us now," Mr. Mitchell said. "You can feel it, can't you? The hunger. It will never go away. You'll eat and eat and eat, and you'll still be starving. That's the curse. That's what we are." I touched my shoulder where he'd bitten me. I could feel something moving under the skin, something changing. The wound wasn't bleeding anymore, it was closing up, but not healing, transforming. The flesh around it had turned gray. "My grandmother told me stories about the Wendigo," I said. My voice sounded strange, deeper. "She said it started during the Trail of Tears. Cherokee families were forced to march through winter with no food. People were dying. Some of them ate the dead to survive. And the ones who ate human flesh were cursed," Mrs. Mitchell finished. "They became the first Wendigos. The hunger spirit took to hem over, made them into monsters that could never be satisfied." The twin creature giggled with both of its mouths. "We're all hungry, forever and ever and ever." I looked at them. These things that used to be a normal family. A lawyer and a teacher and two little girls who probably liked to play with dolls and watch cartoons. The curse had destroyed them, turned them into something that could never be human again. "How do I stop it?" I asked. "How do I stop myself from changing?" "You can't," Mr. Mitchell said. "Once you're bitten, once the hunger gets inside you, there's no cure. You'll either become like us, or you'll starve to death fighting it. Either way, you'll suffer." The hunger roared inside me. It wanted me to attack them. Not to defend myself, to eat them, to tear them apart and consume every piece. I could feel my jaw starting to extend, my teeth getting longer. I thought about Maria, about how she died because she wanted to save a child, about her screams. I thought about my grandmother who tried to warn me about these woods, about the stories I'd ignored because I thought I was too smart to believe in monsters. And I thought about all the other families who might come to this cabin, all the people who might get trapped in a winter storm with no food, all the new Wendigos that would be created if someone didn't stop this cycle. I stood up. My legs felt stronger than they should. The curse was giving me power as it took my humanity. "You're right," I said. "I can't stop myself from changing, but I can make sure you never hurt anyone else." I ran, not away from them, toward them, toward the cabin. They followed, confused. They were faster than me, even with the curse strengthening me. Mr. Mitchell caught my leg and brought me down. We rolled in the snow. He tried to bite my face. I punched him in the throat and he let go. I crawled toward the cabin. Mrs. Mitchell landed on my back. She was so light now, all bones and stretched skin, but she was strong. She grabbed my hair and pulled my head back. "Why do you fight?" she whispered in my ear. "Why do you struggle? Just let go. Let the hunger take you. It's easier than fighting." I reached back and grabbed her arm. My hand closed around her wrist and I felt bones crack. She shrieked and let go. I made it through the cabin door. The twin creature was already inside, cutting me off. Both heads smiled at me with Maria's blood still on their teeth. "Where are you going?" one head asked. "You can't escape the hunger," the other head said. I ran past them to the fireplace. The fire was still burning. I grabbed a piece of burning wood and held it in my hand. My skin blistered and smoked, but I didn't drop it. The pain felt good. It cut through the hunger, made me remember I was still human. "Fire," I said. "My grandmother said the only way to kill a Wendigo is with fire." The three creatures stopped. For the first time, I saw fear in their black eyes. "You'll burn yourself too," Mr. Mitchell said. "You'll die." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll die human." I threw the burning wood onto the couch. The old fabric caught immediately. The fire spread fast, up the walls, across the floor, up the stairs. The whole cabin had been built in the 1800s. It was dry as kindling. The creatures screamed. The fire hurt them in a way nothing else could. Their stretched bodies started to smoke and char. They ran for the door, but I stood in their way. "Rebecca, please," Mrs. Mitchell begged. She sounded almost human again. "Don't do this. We were good people. We didn't mean to become monsters." "I know," I said. Tears were running down my face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I grabbed her and held her while the fire burned around us. She screamed and clawed at me, but I didn't let go. Mr. Mitchell tried to save her. The twin creature tried to crawl away, but the fire was everywhere now, eating the cabin, eating them, eating the curse. The heat was incredible. My clothes were smoking. My skin was blistering. The hunger inside me was screaming, begging me to let go, to run, to save myself so I could keep feeding forever. But I held on. Even when Mrs. Mitchell's body turned to ash in my arms, even when the ceiling started to collapse, even when I couldn't breathe anymore because the air was too hot, I held on until everything went black. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital in Knoxville. The doctor said I'd been found half a mile from the cabin, lying in the snow. A search and rescue team had spotted the fire and come to investigate. They found the cabin burned to the ground and me barely alive in the woods. They said I was lucky. Second-degree burns on my hands and face, broken ribs, severe hypothermia. But I was alive. I never told them what really happened. I said the Mitchell family had died in a house fire, that Maria and I had tried to save them, but the fire was too intense, that Maria had died from smoke inhalation, that I'd barely escaped. They believed me. Why wouldn't they? Fire accidents happen all the time in old cabins, and there wasn't much left to investigate, just bones and ash. But I knew the truth. I knew what I'd seen, what I'd done, and I knew the curse was still inside me. The bite mark on my shoulder never fully healed. It's still there 43 years later, a crescent moon of gray skin that's cold to the touch. And the hunger never completely went away. I learned to control it. My grandmother's sister taught me Cherokee purification rituals. I fast on the full moon. I never eat meat. I say the prayers every morning and every night. It keeps the hunger quiet, keeps me human. But sometimes, on the coldest winter nights, I feel it stirring. I feel my teeth getting loose, my jaw aching, my fingers stretching. And I have to lock myself in my house and sing the death song until morning comes. I retired from the Park Service 6 months after the fire. I couldn't go back into those woods, couldn't risk meeting the Wendigo again, because I know it's still out there. The fire killed the Mitchell Fae, Millie, but the curse itself, the hunger spirit that's lived in those mountains since the Trail of Tears, that's still there, still waiting for the next desperate family, the next harsh winter, the next person who makes the terrible choice to survive by consuming human flesh. I've spent the last 4 decades researching similar incidents, cases of cannibalism in isolated areas, people who went missing in the woods during winter storms, families that disappeared, and I've found dozens of reports across the Appalachian Mountains, hundreds if you go back far enough. The Wendigo is real, and it's not just one creature, It's a curse that spreads like a disease. Every person who eats human flesh becomes a potential host. Every harsh winter creates new opportunities for the hunger spirit to take hold. That's why I'm telling you this story now. Not for entertainment, not for clicks or views, but as a warning. If you ever find yourself lost in the mountains with no food, remember, there are some lines you can never uncross. Some choices that change you forever. Some hungers that can never be satisfied. Maria Santos died because she tried to save a child. The Mitchell family died because they made a desperate choice to survive. And I'm still alive, 43 years later, fighting every day to stay human. Don't go into the wilderness unprepared. Don't ignore warnings about winter storms. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where cannibalism seems like the only option, choose death instead. Trust me, death is better than what comes after. My name is Rebecca Stonehart, and this is the story I've carried for 43 years. I'm 71 years old now. The hunger gets stronger as I get older. I don't know how much longer I can control it. So I'm telling you this now, while I'm still human enough to remember why it matters. The Wendigo is real. It's out there. And if you're not careful, it might be inside you too. My name is Catherine Brightwater, and I need you to understand something before I tell you what happened in those mountains. I've been a park ranger for 14 years. I've pulled lost hikers out of ravines, treated snake bites, and talked teenagers out of dangerous climbs. I know these forests like most people know their own backyards. I don't believe in ghosts, spirits, or things that go bump in the night. At least, I didn't. November 1979 was when everything changed. I was 39 then, working the Cherokee National Forest in Tennessee, specifically the Joyce-Kilmer area. Most folks don't know about Joyce-Kilmer. It's one of the last patches of old-growth forest in the southeast. Trees so big you can't wrap your arms around them, some over 400 years old. It's beautiful, but it's also remote. The kind of place where your radio crackles with static and the nearest road is miles away through thick forest. I'd been a teacher before becoming a ranger. Elementary school, 2nd grade. Loved those kids, but the pay was terrible, and I needed something that let me use my outdoor skills. My daddy had been a forest service worker, taught me to track and identify plants before I could tie my shoes. So when the ranger position opened up, it felt like coming home. Part of my job was educational outreach. Schools would bring kids for nature walks, and I'd teach them about wildlife, forest conservation, that sort of thing. I was good at it too. Kids trusted me. I knew how to talk to them without talking down to them. The morning everything went wrong started like any other. Mrs. Henderson from Gatlinburg Elementary had called 2 weeks earlier to schedule a field trip for her 3rd grade class. 20 kids, she said. They were studying forest ecosystems and wanted to see the old-growth trees, standard stuff. I remember that morning being colder than usual for November. There'd been snow the night before, not much. Just a dusting, but enough to make everything look clean and quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice sounds more. Your footsteps on frozen leaves. The crack of a branch. Your own breathing. Mrs. Henderson arrived right on time at 9 a.m. with a yellow school bus full of excited 8-year-olds. She was maybe 50. Gray hair pulled back tight. The kind of teacher who'd been doing this for decades. Professional. Prepared. She had permission slips, first aid kit, emergency contacts, everything by the book. "Beautiful morning for it," she said, shaking my hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Perfect weather," I agreed, though something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it then. The forest was too quiet, maybe. Even the birds seemed muted. The kids piled off the bus in a chaos of backpacks and excited chatter. I did my usual head count, 20 exactly, just like Mrs. Henderson had said. I remember some of their names. Emma Walsh, a redhead with freckles who asked a million questions. Tommy Rodriguez, who kept trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue. Susie Kim, quiet and observant, always taking notes in a little notebook. We started with the basic safety talk. Stay with the group. Don't wander off. If you get separated, sit down and blow your whistle. I'd given each kid a plastic whistle on a lanyard. Don't touch plants you don't recognize. Standard procedure that I'd given hundreds of times. "How big are the really old trees?" Emma asked, bouncing on her toes. "Some are 8 feet across," I told her. "So big that if you and all your classmates held hands, you still couldn't reach around them." Their eyes went wide. City kids, most of them. The biggest tree they'd seen was probably in a park somewhere. We headed into the forest on the main trail. I led, Mrs. Henderson brought up the rear. The kids stayed bunched, and in the middle, chattering and pointing at everything. It was going well, normal. But that feeling of wrongness kept growing. The temperature seemed to drop as we went deeper, which didn't make sense. It was barely 10 in the morning, the sun was up, and we weren't climbing to higher elevation. If anything, it should have been getting warmer. About half a mile in, I stopped at my first teaching station, a massive poplar tree that predated European settlement. The kids gathered around while I explained how you could tell a tree's age, how old-growth forests work differently than new forests. That's when I heard it. Singing. Children's voices, high and sweet, coming from somewhere ahead on the trail. But that was impossible. We were the only group scheduled for this area, and the trail didn't connect to any roads or campsites for miles. I held up my hand for quiet. "Do you hear that?" Mrs. Henderson tilted her head, listening. The kids went silent, which was unusual for 28-year-olds. The singing stopped. "Hear what?" Mrs. Henderson asked. I waited another moment, but there was nothing. Just the normal forest sounds. Wind in the branches, the distant call of a crow. "Nothing," I said. "Thought I heard something." But Emma was frowning, looking toward the deeper forest. "I heard it too," she whispered. "It sounded like kids singing." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. We continued deeper into the forest, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. You know that sensation, when the hair on the back of your neck stands up for no reason you can name. I kept glancing over my shoulder, scanning the trees, but saw nothing unusual. The kids were getting excited about everything. They found deer tracks in a muddy patch, collected interesting leaves, asked endless questions about why some trees grew straight and others grew crooked. Normal kid stuff. But I noticed they were staying closer together than usual, bunching up like sheep when they sense a predator nearby. "Miss Catherine?" Tommy called. "Set out." "Why is it getting so cold?" He was right. The temperature had dropped noticeably. I could see my breath now, and some of the kids were shivering, despite their winter coats. The strange thing was, the cold seemed to be coming from ahead of us, like we were walking into a freezer. "Sometimes valleys trap cold air," I explained. But that wasn't really true. This trail didn't follow a valley, and cold air sinks. It doesn't hang in the middle of a forest path. We'd been walking for about an hour when we reached the ruins. I'd been through this area dozens of times, but I'd never really paid attention to them before. Just some old stone foundations scattered through the trees, remains of a logging town from the 1920s. Most people walked right past without noticing, but the kids were fascinated. "Can we explore?" Emma asked, already heading toward the nearest foundation. "Just for a few minutes," Mrs. Henderson said before I could object. "It's educational." I didn't like it, but she was right. The ruins were safe enough, just low stone walls and a few concrete slabs, and it tied into what they were learning about human impact on forests. The kids scattered among the foundations, chattering about what the buildings might have been. I followed them, pointing out where a store might have stood, where houses had been. Normal tour guide stuff. That's when Susie Kim tugged on my sleeve. "Miss Catherine," she said quietly, "who are those other kids?" I looked where she was pointing. At first I didn't see anything, just trees and shadows and the gray stone of an old foundation. Then something moved. Children. 3 of them, maybe 4, standing at the edge of the clearing. They looked to be about the same age as my group, but something was wrong with the picture. Their clothes were old-fashioned, wool coats and knickers and caps like you'd see in photos from the 1920s. And they were pale, not just pale-skinned, but pale all over, like they were made of fog. I blinked, and they were gone. "I don't see anyone," I told Susie, but my voice came out shaky. "They were right there," she insisted. 3 kids in funny clothes. They were watching us. More kids were noticing now. Emma had stopped chattering and was staring at the same spot. Tommy had moved closer to Mrs. Henderson, who was checking her watch and gathering the group. "Time to move on," I announced, louder than necessary. "Stay together, everyone." But as we left the ruins, I heard the singing again. Definitely children's voices, coming from the direction we'd just been. Only now it sounded like more voices, a lot more, and one of my kids was missing. "Wait," I called out, doing a quick head count. 19. I counted again. Still 19. "Where's Tommy?" Mrs. Henderson asked. She'd noticed too. We backtracked to the ruins, calling his name. My radio crackled with static when I tried to call for backup. The kids were getting scared now, huddling together and looking around with wide eyes. I found Tommy sitting on one of the foundation walls, staring off into the forest with a dreamy expression. "Tommy," I called. "We're leaving." He turned toward me, but slowly, like he was waking up from a deep sleep. "Did you hear them singing?" he asked. "Who's singing?" "The other kids. They said they knew games we could play, better games." Mrs. Henderson and I exchanged glances. This was getting too weird. "Come on," I said firmly, taking Tommy's hand. "We need to catch up with the group." But when we got back to where I'd left the other kids, they were scattered again. Some were wandering toward the deeper forest, following what looked like a faint trail I'd never noticed before. Others were standing perfectly still, listening to something I couldn't hear. "Everyone back to the main trail," I shouted. "Right now." That's when the temperature really dropped, like walking into a meat freezer. My breath came out in thick clouds, and frost started forming on the trees around. And us. In November. In Tennessee. At noon. And that's when I saw the first body. Mrs. Henderson was lying at the base of a big oak tree, maybe 30 yards from where she'd been standing just minutes before. Her skin was blue-white, her lips purple. She looked like she'd been frozen solid, but that was impossible. It had been maybe 5 minutes since I'd seen her checking her watch. I ran to her, my boots slipping on leaves that had suddenly turned icy. No pulse, no breathing. Her skin was cold as stone, and when I tried to lift her arm, it was completely rigid. "Mrs. Henderson!" Emma screamed from behind me. I spun around. All the kids were staring at their teacher's body with expressions of pure terror. Some were crying, others were backing away. And in the forest around us, I could hear children laughing. Not my kids. Other children. Children who sounded like they were having the time of their lives. "Everyone stay together," I shouted, pulling out my radio. Still nothing but static. "We're going back to the bus right now." But when I turned toward where the main trail should be, I couldn't find it. The forest looked the same in every direction. Tall trees, thick underbrush, scattered stone foundations that definitely hadn't been there before. We were lost. Mrs. Henderson was dead. The temperature was dropping fast, and somewhere in the trees around us, children were singing nursery rhymes I'd never heard before. I tried to keep the kids calm while I figured out what to do, but panic was setting in. Some were crying for Mrs. Henderson. Others kept asking why it was so cold. Emma kept pointing at shadows between the trees, insisting she saw children watching us. "They're wearing old-timey clothes," she whispered, "and their faces are all white." I gathered the kids into a tight circle, backs to the center, facing out. Survival training 101. Never let anything attack from behind. But this wasn't a bear or a lost hiker situation. This was something I had no training for. "Listen carefully," I told them in my calmest voice. "We're going to walk, together, staying close until we find the main trail. Nobody wanders off. Nobody stops to look at anything. We stick together no matter what." I picked what I hoped was the right direction and started walking. The kids clustered around me like baby ducks. My radio kept crackling with static, but occasionally I caught fragments of voices. Not dispatcher chatter, children's voices, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. The forest seemed to shift around us as we walked. Paths appeared where there shouldn't be paths. Stone foundations cropped up in places I was sure had been empty forest minutes before. And the cold was getting worse. Ice was forming on the trees now, covering them in a thin shell that clicked and chimed when the wind blew. Miss Catherine, Susie said quietly, I think we're being followed. I'd been thinking the same thing. Footsteps behind us that stopped when we stopped. Shadows moving between the trees. The sense of being watched by many eyes. How many? I asked, not turning around. Lots, she whispered. We came to a clearing I didn't recognize. In the center stood the ruins of what had obviously been a school. You could tell by the long, low foundation and the concrete steps leading to what had once been a front door. A cast-iron bell lay on its side near the steps, green with age. The kids stopped walking. Some were staring at the ruins with fascination. Others looked scared. This wasn't here before, Emma said. She was right. I'd never seen this building foundation before, and I knew every structure in this section of forest. But there it was, solid and real, with what looked like fresh snow in the corners where walls had once stood. Can we go inside? Tommy asked. There is no inside, I pointed out. It's just a foundation. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure that was true. The air above the foundation shimmered like heat waves, and for a moment I could swear I saw walls, wooden walls with windows and a roof and smoke coming from a chimney. I blinked hard, and it was just ruins again. We're not stopping here, I said firmly. We need to find the trail. But the kids weren't listening. They were walking toward the foundation like sleepwalkers, their eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. Even their footsteps sounded different, lighter, like they were floating. Stop, I shouted. They kept walking. I ran after them, grabbing arms and pulling them back, but they felt strange in my grip. Lighter than they should be. Colder. That's when I realized some of them weren't my kids at all. The boy I thought was Tommy had the right brown hair and blue jacket, but his face was wrong. Too pale, and his eyes were gray instead of brown. When I looked closer, his clothes weren't quite right either. The jacket was older, with different buttons. The girl I thought was Emma had red hair and freckles, but her coat was made of rough wool, and her shoes were black leather boots that came up to her ankles. She smiled at me, and her teeth were too white, too perfect. Who are you? I whispered. We're here for the lesson, the maybe Emma said, in a voice like wind through winter trees. Miss Abernathy is waiting. I looked around frantically. Some of the kids were definitely mine. I could tell by their modern winter coats and sneakers. But others were dressed like they'd stepped out of an old photograph. And they were all walking toward the school foundation like they belonged there. Children, a woman's voice called from the ruins. Time for class. I turned toward the voice and saw her. A tall woman in a long dark dress and white apron standing in what should have been empty air above the foundation. She was pale as moonlight, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She held a brass bell in one hand and a piece of chalk in the other. Miss Abernathy, the strange children said in unison, their voices echoing like they were speaking from the bottom of a well. Come along, she said, smiling. We have so much to learn. My real kids, the ones in modern clothes, were almost to the foundation now. Their faces had that same dreamy expression Tommy had worn earlier, like they were walking in their sleep. I ran after them, slipping on the icy ground. Emma! Susie! Tommy! Don't go in there! But they couldn't hear me. Or if they could, they didn't care. They stepped up onto the foundation, and the moment their feet touched the old concrete, they began to change. Their winter coats flickered, becoming wool jackets and heavy dresses. Their sneakers turned into old-fashioned boots. Their skin grew pale and translucent. No! I screamed, lunging forward. Miss Abernathy looked at me with eyes like black holes. There's room for one more, she said sweetly. Won't you join our class, Miss Brightwater? The temperature dropped so fast I gasped. My breath came out in thick clouds and ice began forming on my eyelashes. The world around the school foundation shimmered and solidified, and suddenly I was looking at a complete building. Wooden walls, glass windows, a bell tower with a brass bell. Through the windows I could see children sitting at wooden desks. Some wore modern clothes, some wore clothes from decades past. All had the same pale, translucent skin, All were perfectly still, watching Miss Abernathy with empty eyes. And in the front row, I saw Emma. Her red hair was faded to gray, her freckles barely visible. She turned to look at me through the window and mouthed a single word: help. I had to get those kids out of there, but I had no idea how. The school building looked solid now, complete with a smoking chimney and warm light glowing from the windows, but I knew it was impossible. This had been ruins 5 minutes ago. I circled the building, looking for a way in. The front door was heavy wood with brass hinges, and when I touched the handle, it was ice cold. Through the windows, I could see more children than had been in my group. Dozens of them, all sitting perfectly still at wooden desks. Some wore clothes from the 1920s. Others looked more recent, 1950s, maybe 1960s. And scattered among them were my kids, their bright winter coats now faded and old-fashioned. Miss Abernathy stood at the front of the class, writing on a blackboard that hadn't been there moments before. She was teaching them something, but I couldn't hear what through the glass. I tried the door, locked. I banged on the windows. The children inside didn't react, didn't even turn their heads, but Miss Abernathy did. She looked directly at me and smiled, then walked to the window and opened it. "Class is in session," she said in that voice like winter wind. "Please don't disturb the children's learning." "Let them go," I said. "They don't belong here." "Oh, but they do," she replied. "We've been waiting so long for new students." The 1923 class was getting lonely. 1923. I remembered reading about that in some old Forest Service records. A tuberculosis outbreak had hit the logging town hard. A lot of children had died. "You're dead," I said. "All of you. You died decades ago." Miss Abernathy's smile grew wider, showing too many teeth. "Death is just another lesson to learn, and we're very good teachers." Through the window, I could see Emma raising her hand. Miss Abernathy turned back to the class. "Yes, Emma dear?" "When can we go home?" Emma asked, but her voice sounded flat, emotionless. "This is your home now," Miss Abernathy said gently. "You're part of our school family forever." I had to do something. I picked up a rock and threw it at the window as hard as I could. It bounced off like the glass was made of steel. "Violence has no place in the classroom," Miss Abernathy said disapprovingly. "Perhaps you need to learn some manners." Then, the temperature dropped even further. Ice began forming on my clothes, weighing me down. My fingers were going numb, and when I breathed, it felt like swallowing knives. That's when I heard howling from the forest behind me. I turned and saw a man running toward the school through the trees. He was tall and lean, with long black hair, and wearing Forest Service clothes like mine. I'd never been so happy to see another person in my life. "James," I called out. James Stormcrow, my partner. Cherokee descent, best tracker in the Forest Service, and right now my only hope of getting out of this alive. He reached me just as I was starting to collapse from the cold. "Catherine, what the hell is going on? I got your emergency signal on the radio, but it was all garbled." I looked at my radio. I hadn't sent any emergency signal, but I was grateful he was here. "The kids," I gasped, pointing at the school. "They're trapped in there. That woman, she's some kind of ghost. She's collecting children." James looked at the building and his face went pale. "Shit," he whispered. "It's really happening." "You know about this?" "My grandmother told stories," he said grimly, "about places where the dead don't rest, about spirits that feed on the living." He pulled out a small leather pouch from his jacket. "She gave me this, said it might help someday." I never believed her. Inside the school, Miss Abernathy was teaching again. The children sat motionless, listening. But I could see that some of my kids were becoming more translucent by the minute. Emma's freckles were almost completely gone. Tommy looked like he was made of mist. "They're fading," I said. "She's turning them into ghosts." James opened his pouch and pulled out what looked like sage and some other herbs I didn't recognize. "My grandmother said the spirits are anchored to something from when they were alive. If we can find it and destroy it." The brass bell. It had to be. I remembered seeing it by the foundation steps before the building materialized. "The bell," I said. "There was an old school bell by the ruins." We looked around frantically. The building seemed solid now, but I knew underneath it was still just a foundation. The bell had to be somewhere. James started chanting in Cherokee, burning the herbs. The smell was sharp and clean, cutting through the supernatural cold. For a moment the building flickered, and I could see through it to the stone foundation beneath. There, the brass bell was still there, sitting on the foundation where the front steps would be. "I have to get to it," I said. "You can't go in there," James warned. "She'll take you too." But what choice did I have? Those kids were my responsibility. I ran toward the building. The moment I touched the door, everything changed. I wasn't outside anymore. I was standing in the back of a classroom full of children, all turning to stare at me with empty eyes. Miss Abernathy smiled from the front of the room. "Class, we have a visitor. Miss Brightwater has decided to join us after all." The cold hit me like a physical blow. I could feel myself starting to change, my modern clothes flickering and shifting. But I fought it, focusing on the kids I'd brought here, my kids. "Emma," I called out. "Tommy, Susie, remember who you are? Remember your families?" For a moment, some of them blinked. Emma's freckles became a little more visible. Tommy's eyes cleared slightly. "That's enough," Miss Abernathy said sharply. She raised her hand, and the cold became unbearable. Ice formed on my skin, in my lungs. I was freezing from the inside out. But James's chanting was getting louder outside. The building shook, and cracks appeared in the walls. Through them, I could see the real forest, the real ruins, and I could see the bell. I lunged for it, breaking through the wall like it was made of smoke. My hand closed around the brass bell just as Miss Abernathy screamed behind me, "No, you don't understand. Without the school, they'll be lost forever." Maybe she was right. Maybe destroying their anchor would condemn the children to something worse. But I couldn't let her keep collecting more victims. I raised the bell above my head and brought it down hard on the stone foundation. It shattered like glass. The world exploded with light and sound and the screams of children who had been trapped for decades. The school building collapsed in on itself, dissolving like sugar in water. The supernatural cold vanished, replaced by normal November air. When the light faded, I was standing in the ruins with James. Scattered around the foundation were my kids, my real kids, in their real clothes, blinking and confused but alive. But not all of them. I counted again and again, but the number didn't change. Only 8 had made it out. Emma, Tommy, and Susie were among them, thank God. But 12 were gone. Just gone. As if they'd never existed at all. The official report said the children died of exposure, that a freak weather system had moved through the area, dropping temperatures to dangerous levels faster than anyone could have predicted. 12 children and 1 teacher lost to hypothermia. Their bodies never recovered due to the difficult terrain and continued severe weather. I went along with the story. What else could I do? Tell them about ghost teachers and phantom schools? They'd have locked me up. The 8 surviving kids remembered it differently. Each one. Some talked about playing with children in old-fashioned clothes. Others remembered a nice teacher who wanted them to stay for extra lessons. A few claimed they'd been in a real school building, but that it had felt like a dream. Child psychologists said it was trauma, the mind's way of coping with a horrible experience. Selective memory, fantasy overlaying reality, all perfectly normal responses to surviving when others didn't. I transferred to an urban park position within a month. Told my supervisor I needed a change of scenery after the tragedy. He understood. Everyone understood. Nobody questioned. Did it when a ranger with 14 years of experience in wilderness areas suddenly wanted to work in the city. But the families of those lost children still go back to Cherokee National Forest sometimes. They leave flowers at the trailhead, hold memorials at the ranger station. And sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist is thick among the trees, they swear they can hear their children calling to them. The Forest Service has closed that section of trail indefinitely. Too dangerous, they say. Unstable weather patterns, difficult terrain. But I know the real reason. Other rangers have reported strange things. Children's laughter when no children are present. Footprints in the snow that appear overnight and lead nowhere. Cold spots that have no explanation. James Stormcrow left the service too, not long after I did. He said his grandmother's stories had more truth in them than he'd ever wanted to believe. He went back to the reservation, became a teacher himself. But he keeps that little leather pouch with him always, and sometimes he burns sage in his classroom for no reason the principal understands. I still get calls sometimes, from other parks, other forests, rangers who've heard stories about the Cherokee incident and want to know what really happened. They tell me about missing hikers, cold spots, voices in the woods, children's voices. I always tell them the same thing: file your reports, follow protocol, let the search and rescue teams do their jobs. Don't go into the woods alone. And if you hear children singing where no children should be, turn around and walk away. Walk away fast, because there are places in this world where the dead don't rest, where tragedy leaves scars that never heal. Places where lonely spirits reach out to the living, not out of malice, but out of a desperate need for connection that death couldn't break. Miss Abernathy and her student, this weren't evil, I realize now. They were just lost, trapped between worlds, trying to create the life they'd been denied. But that doesn't make them any less dangerous to the living who stumble into their domain. The brass bell is gone, shattered into pieces too small to reassemble. But sometimes, when the wind is right and the forest is very quiet, you can still hear it ringing in the distance. A faint, silvery sound that calls children to lessons they'll never finish, in a school that exists only in the spaces between life and death. I keep the newspaper clippings about the incident in a folder in my desk. 12 children lost in hiking tragedy. Search called off after week of effort. Community mourns young victims. The photos show smiling kids at school events, birthday parties, family gatherings. Normal children living normal lives until they walked into something that should have been just a forest. Emma Walsh grew up to be a teacher, like Mrs. Henderson had been. She works with special needs children now, kids who've experienced trauma. She's good at it, patient and understanding in ways that come from having seen the impossible and survived it. Tommy Rodriguez became a search and rescue volunteer. He's pulled dozens of people out of the wilderness over the years, always insisting on checking places other searchers might miss. He won't talk about why, but I know. He's looking for the ones who didn't make it out, hoping maybe he can still save them somehow. Susie Kim became a writer. She writes children's books about friendship and courage, stories where the scary things turn out to be misunderstood rather than evil. But she's never written about what happened in Cherokee National Forest. Some stories, she says, are too true to be fiction. The other survivors have gone on with their lives too, but all of them avoid the mountains. All of them have children of their own now, and they're very careful about where they let those children play. As for me, I work in Shelby Park in Nashville now. City Park, safe and tame, with clear boundaries and regular patrol routes. No mysterious ruins, no cold spots, no voices in the wind, just joggers and dog walkers and children playing on modern playground equipment under the watchful eyes of their parents. But sometimes, on foggy mornings, when the mist rolls in thick from the Cumberland River, I hear something that makes me stop and listen. Children's voices, high and sweet, singing songs I don't recognize. And for just a moment I see them, pale figures in old-fashioned clothes, watching me from the edge of the mist. They never approach. They just watch and sing and fade away when the sun burns off the fog. Maybe they're looking for a new teacher. Maybe they're looking for new students. Or maybe they're just reminding me that some lessons can't be unlearned, and some schools never truly close their doors. All I know for certain is this. If you're ever hiking in the Cherokee National Forest, and you hear children singing in the wilderness, turn around and leave immediately. Don't investigate. Don't try to help. Don't think you can handle whatever you might find, because the hollow children are always looking for someone new to join their class. And the lesson they want to teach you is one that lasts forever. Class is always in session and school never lets out. My name is Elizabeth Ravenhart, and I've been a park ranger for 16 years. I've seen things in these mountains that would make most people pack up and move to the city. But nothing prepared me for what happened in March of 1988. I worked the night shift in Daniel Boone National Forest, up in the Cumberland Gap area of Kentucky. Most folks think being a ranger is all about helping lost hikers and putting out campfires. But when you work nights like I do, you deal with different problems. Poachers, drug runners, sometimes just scared kids who got lost after dark. I'm 43 years old, been a widow for 8 years now. My husband died in a logging accident, and after that, I threw myself into this job. My grandmother was Cherokee, my grandfather was Scottish, and both sides of my family knew these mountains well. I grew up hearing old stories around the fire, but I never believed the scary ones. Shape-shifting cat spirits? Come on, the mountains in March are tricky. Winter's not quite done, but spring is trying to push through. The animals are restless. Bears coming out of their dens hungry and mean. Wildcats looking for mates. It's breeding season for predators, which means they're more dangerous than usual. My beat covers some of the most remote areas in the forest, places where cell phones don't work, and the nearest road might be 10 miles away. I drive an old Ford pickup with a CB radio that works maybe half the time. Most nights, I'm completely on my own. The trouble started on a Tuesday. 3 guys from the maintenance crew were working a night shift, fixing a washed-out section of road near Pinnacle Peak. Frank Miller, Jose Valdez, and Tommy Chen. Good guys, all of them. Frank had 2 kids. Jose was saving money to get married. Tommy was just 22, fresh out of college. They were supposed to radio in every 2 hours. When they missed their midnight C, I figured their radio was acting up. These mountains play hell with electronics. But when they missed the 2 a.m. call too, I knew something was wrong. I found their work truck around dawn. It was parked right where it should be, next to a pile of gravel and some orange cones. But the truck looked like it had been attacked by something with claws the size of kitchen knives. Long scratches went clean through the metal on the driver's side door. The hood was dented like something heavy had landed on it. The strangest thing was how quiet everything was. I've been working these mountains for 16 years, and I know the sounds. Birds singing, squirrels chattering, insects buzzing. But that morning, nothing made a sound. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. I called it in on my radio. Within an hour, we had search teams combing the area. Sheriff's deputies, volunteer firefighters, even some folks from the state police. We looked all day Tuesday and Wednesday. Found some footprints near the truck, but they didn't lead anywhere useful. That's when I met Robert Stormwind. Robert was a Cherokee elder who worked part-time for the Park Service as a cultural consultant. He was in his 70s with long gray hair he kept in a braid and eyes that seemed to see more than most people's. When he heard about the missing workers, he drove up from his home in Tennessee. "Elizabeth," he said, using my full name like my grandmother used to. "Show me where you found the truck." We drove out there together on Thursday morning. Robert got out and walked around the vehicle, not touching anything, just looking. He crouched down next to the claw marks and made a soft, whistling sound. "These scratches," he said. "They're too big for a bear, too deep for a mountain lion." "So what made them?" I asked. Robert stood up and looked around at the trees. The way he did it made my skin crawl, like he was checking to see if something was watching us. "You know the old stories, Elizabeth. Your grandmother was Cherokee." "I know stories," I said. "But stories don't tear up. Truck doors." Robert reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch made of leather. He opened it and showed me some tobacco and what looked like dried herbs. "Your grandmother ever tell you about the Wampus cat?" I felt cold all of a sudden, even though the sun was shining. "She mentioned it, said it was just a story to scare kids." "Stories have power in these mountains," Robert said, "especially the old ones." That night I was patrolling the area around Pinnacle Peak when I heard it. A woman screaming, high and desperate like someone in terrible pain. The sound came from deep in the woods, maybe half a mile off the road. I grabbed my flashlight and my service weapon and headed into the trees. The scream came again, and this time it didn't sound quite human. It started like a woman crying for help, but it ended in a sound no human throat could make. a wild, angry yowl that made every hair on my body stand up. I stopped walking and listened. The forest was dead quiet again. Even my own breathing sounded too loud. That's when I saw the eyes. Two yellow lights, maybe 8 feet off the ground, watching me from behind a big oak tree. Too high up to be a person, too big to be a regular cat. They just stared at me for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few seconds. Then they blinked out like someone had turned off a switch. I stood there in the dark for a long time, my hand on my gun, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. Eventually, I backed away to my truck and drove home. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called Robert Stormwind. I need to know more about the Wampus cat, I told him. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You saw something? Maybe. I don't know what I saw. I'll be there in 2 hours. Robert brought coffee and a book that looked older than dirt. We sat in my kitchen while he told me the story. Long time ago, he said, there was a Cherokee woman who was curious about things she shouldn't have been curious about. The men of the tribe had sacred ceremonies that women weren't allowed to see. But this woman, she hid in the woods and watched. He opened the old book and showed me a drawing of a creature that was half woman, half cat. It had the body of a person but the head of a mountain lion with claws instead of fingers. When the medicine men found out what she'd done, they cursed her, said she would walk the mountains forever as a creature of both worlds, belonging to neither. She would hunt men who violated sacred places, just like she had violated the sacred ceremony. I stared at the drawing. The yellow eyes looked familiar. That's just a story, Robert. Is it? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a plastic bag. Inside was a tuft of hair. Found this on a branch near the truck yesterday. You ever seen hair like this? The hair was strange. Part of it looked human, long and black like a woman's. But part of it was definitely animal fur, coarse and gray like a cat's. How is that possible? The curse changed her, Robert said. She can shift between forms, woman to cat and back again. But she's never fully one or the other anymore. That afternoon, we went back to where the maintenance truck had been found. This time, we brought plaster to make casts of any tracks we could find. Near a muddy spot by the road, we found prints that made my stomach turn. They started as human footprints, a woman's bare feet. But after about 10 steps, they changed. The heel got smaller, the toes spread out and grew longer. By the end of the trail, they were cat paws the size of dinner plates. She was following the workers, Robert said quietly, stalking them. We followed the tracks into the woods. They led us about a quarter mile to a small clearing where someone had built a campfire recently. The ashes were cold, but scattered around the fire ring we found things that made my blood run cold. Pieces of work clothes, a hard hat with claw, marks through it, a wallet with Frank Miller's driver's license inside, and bones. Not human bones, thank God, but deer bones that had been cracked open and sucked clean. She's feeding, Robert said, getting stronger. That night I couldn't stop thinking about Frank's 2 kids. How was I going to tell them their daddy wasn't coming home? How was I going to explain that something out of a Cherokee legend had killed him? I was driving my patrol route around midnight when my headlights picked up something moving on the road ahead. A woman in a torn white dress, walking barefoot down the center line. Her long black hair hung over her face. I stopped the truck and called out to her. Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need help? She stopped walking but didn't turn around. For a moment everything was quiet except for the sound of my engine idling. Then she looked back at me over her shoulder. Her face was human, but her eyes were yellow like a cat's. They reflected my headlights like mirrors. When she smiled, I saw teeth that were too sharp and too long. I don't need help, she said, and her voice was like gravel mixed with honey. But you might. I reached for my radio to call for backup, but when I looked up again, she was gone. Not running away, not hiding behind a tree. Just gone, like she'd never been there at all. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the radio. Base, this is Ranger Ravenheart. I need backup at mile marker 15 on Forest Road 47. Static filled the radio. Then a voice that might have been the dispatcher, but it was hard to tell. Did you say backup, Elizabeth? What's your emergency? I opened my mouth to answer, but what was I going to say? That I'd seen a shape-shifting Catwoman from Cherokee legend? They'd think I'd lost my mind. False alarm, I said finally. Everything's okay. But everything wasn't okay. As I drove away, I could hear something following me through the trees. Something big, moving fast, keeping pace with my truck. Every time I looked in my mirrors, I saw yellow eyes flashing between the branches. The next morning we found Jose Valdez. A hiker discovered his body in a ravine about 2 miles from the road. The state police said it looked like an animal attack, a very large animal with very sharp claws. But they couldn't explain why there was no blood at the scene or why Jose's body looked like it had been drained dry. The medical examiner found bite marks on Jose's neck, 2 puncture wounds, like vampire bites in the movies. But they were too big to be human teeth and the wrong shape to be from any animal they knew about. Mountain lion, the sheriff told the newspapers. Probably rabid. We're advising people to stay out of the forest until we can track it down and destroy it. But I knew it wasn't a mountain lion, and so did Robert. That evening he came to my house with a bag full of things I didn't recognize. Bundles of sage, small stones with symbols carved on them, what looked like old arrowheads made of black glass. We have to stop her, he said. How do you stop something like that? The old ways. Cherokee magic is older than her curse. But it's dangerous, Elizabeth. If we try this and fail, she'll know we're hunting her. She'll come after us next. I thought about Frank's kids and Jose's fiancée. I thought about Tommy Chen, who was still missing somewhere in these mountains. What do we have to do? Robert spread his materials out on my kitchen table. We have to find where she was cursed, the original place where it happened. Then we perform a cleansing ceremony to break the curse and send her spirit to rest. And if she doesn't want to go? Robert looked at me with those ancient eyes. Then we fight. The next night, Robert and I went into the mountains together. He'd spent all day researching old tribal records, trying to figure out where the original cursing had taken place. There's a spot about 5 miles up Pinnacle Peak, he told me as we hiked, through the darkness. Used to be a sacred site where the Cherokee held ceremonies. White settlers built a logging camp there in the 1800s, but it's been abandoned for decades. We carried heavy backpacks full of Robert's ritual supplies, plus camping gear and enough food for 2 days. I also brought my service weapon, though I wasn't sure how much good bullets would do against something like the Wampus cat. The trail up Pinnacle Peak was rough, even in daylight. At night, with only our flashlights to guide us, it was treacherous. Loose rocks rolled under our feet, and low branches grabbed at our clothes like fingers. About halfway up, Robert stopped suddenly and held up his hand for silence. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I listened. At first, all I could hear was our own breathing and the distant sound of wind in the trees. Then I caught it, a low rumbling sound, like a cat purring, but much too loud and much too deep. The sound seemed to be coming from all around us, echoing off the rocks and trees. It made my chest vibrate. "She knows we're here," Robert said. We kept climbing, but now every shadow looked like it might be hiding something with claws and yellow eyes. The purring sound followed us, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, but never completely gone. When we reached the old logging camp, I understood why the Cherokee had considered it sacred. It sat in a natural bowl surrounded by tall cliffs, with a clear stream running through the middle. Even in the darkness, you could feel the power of the place. But something was wrong with it now. The stream was running red, like it was full of blood. The trees around the edges of the clearing were all dead, their branches twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. In the center of the clearing stood the ruins of an old building, probably the main lodge from the logging camp. Most of the roof had fallen in, but the stone foundation was still intact. "This is it," Robert said. "This is where she was cursed." We set up our camp near the stream, away from the ruins. Robert built a small fire and began arranging his ritual materials in a circle around it. He worked quietly, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd done this before. I kept watch, my hand never far from my gun. The purring sound had stopped when we entered the clearing, but I could feel eyes watching us from the darkness beyond the firelight. "How long will this take?" I asked. "The ceremony itself is only about an hour," Robert said, "but we have to wait for the right time. The curse was laid during a new moon, so it has to be broken during a new moon, tomorrow night." "So we just camp here for a whole day, with that thing watching us?" Robert nodded grimly. "She won't attack during daylight. The curse makes her stronger at night, but during the day she's more vulnerable. We should be safe until tomorrow evening." I didn't feel safe. Even with Robert's reassurances, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump, an owl hooting, a branch creaking in the wind, the stream bubbling over the rocks. And twice during the night, I could have sworn I heard that woman's voice singing softly in the darkness, too far away to make out the words. When morning came, I felt like I'd been awake for a week. Robert was already up, boiling water for coffee over the fire. In the daylight, the clearing looked less sinister, but more sad. You could see where the old logging buildings had stood, just piles of rotting wood and rusted metal now. Someone had carved names and dates into some of the trees. Workers from the camp, probably, long dead now. "She was beautiful once," Robert said, following my gaze. "The woman who became the Wampus Cat. The stories say she was curious and brave, always asking questions about things other people just accepted." "What was her name?" "The records don't say. After the curse, her tribe stopped speaking her name. They were afraid it would call her back." We spent the day exploring the ruins and getting ready for the night's ceremony. In the foundation of the old lodge, Robert found what he was looking for. A circle of stones that had been arranged by Cherokee medicine men more than 200 years ago. "This is where they held their ceremonies," he said, "and this is where she was watching from." He pointed to a large boulder about 50 yards away, partially hidden by dead trees. She hid behind that rock and spied on the sacred rituals. As evening approached, Robert began preparing for the cleansing ceremony. He arranged tobacco, sage, and sweetgrass in small piles around the stone circle. Then he placed 4 black arrowheads at the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west. "These are to cut through the curse," he explained. "The arrowheads are made from obsidian that was blessed by Cherokee priests before the white man came to these mountains." The sun set behind the cliffs, and darkness fell over the clearing like a blanket. Robert lit the sage and sweetgrass, filling the air with smoke that smelled like prayers. That's when we heard the laughter. It started low and soft, like a woman enjoying a private joke. But it grew louder and wilder, echoing off the cliffs until it sounded like a whole pack of hyenas cackling in the darkness. Robert began chanting in Cherokee, his voice strong and steady, despite the horrible laughter that surrounded us. I couldn't understand the words, but I could feel their power. The air itself seemed to vibrate with ancient magic. Then the laughter stopped, and silence fell over the clearing like a physical weight. "Come out," Robert called into the darkness. "We know you're there. We've come to free you from your curse." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then something moved at the edge of the firelight. A woman stepped out of the shadows, and my heart nearly stopped. She was tall and graceful, with long black hair and dark skin. She wore a white dress that might have been beautiful once, but now it was torn and stained with things I didn't want to think about. Her feet were bare and bloody, but it was her eyes that made me want to run. They were yellow like a cat's, and they glowed in the firelight with an inner fire that had nothing human in it. "Free me?" she said, and her voice was like breaking glass. "I don't want to be free. I like what I am now." She smiled, and I saw those 2 sharp teeth again. "I like the hunt." The woman who had once been human circled our campfire like a predator sizing up its prey. In the flickering light, I could see that she wasn't quite right anymore. Her movements were too fluid, too graceful. Her fingers were too long, ending in claws instead of nails. "You're Robert Stormwind," she said, never taking those terrible yellow eyes off him. I remember your grandfather. He was one of the medicine men who cursed me. Robert kept chanting, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead. The ritual was taking everything he had. And you, she turned to me, you're the one who's been hunting me, following my trail like a hound. I found my voice somehow. I'm trying to find Tommy Chen, the third worker. What did you do with him? Her laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. The young one? He's safe, for now. But whether he stays that way depends on whether you leave my mountain and never come back. This isn't your mountain, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. This is sacred Cherokee land. You're just a curse that needs to be broken. Her face twisted with rage, and for a moment she looked more cat than woman. A curse? Is that what they told you? I was punished for being curious, for wanting to learn. They turned me into a monster because I dared to watch their precious ceremonies. The change started slowly. Her face begged Bess, and to shift and flow like melted wax. Her jaw stretched out, her nose flattened, and whiskers sprouted from her cheeks. Her hands and feet grew larger, the claws extending like switchblades. But the worst part was that she kept talking the whole time, her voice changing from human to something that was half growl, half scream. I've been hunting men in these mountains for 200 years. Men who take what isn't theirs, who destroy sacred places, who think they own the world. Robert's chanting grew louder, more urgent. The obsidian arrowheads around the stone circle began to glow with a faint blue light. The wampus cat, because that's what she was now, 6 feet tall and covered in gray fur, with the head of a mountain lion and claws like hunting knives, threw back her head and roared. The sound echoed off the cliffs and seemed to go on forever. Then she lunged at Robert. I drew my gun and fired 3 shots, center mass. The bullets hit her and she stumbled, but they didn't stop her. She backhanded Robert across the clearing like he weighed nothing. He hit a tree and collapsed, his chanting cut off mid-word. The blue glow around the arrowheads flickered and went out. Now it's just you and me, Ranger, the creature said. Her voice was barely recognizable as human now. Just like I planned. I kept shooting until my gun was empty, then grabbed a burning branch from the fire and swung it at her like a club. She laughed and batted it out of my hands, then picked me up by the throat. Her claws dug into my neck and I could feel warm blood running down my chest. She lifted me off the ground without any effort at all. I could kill you right now, she whispered, her breath hot and rank in my face. But I want you to see what I did to your friends first. She carried me like a doll to the ruins of the old lodge and dropped me on the stone foundation. My legs wouldn't hold me up, so I crawled toward the wall and used it to pull myself upright. That's when I saw them. Frank, Jose, and Tommy were propped up against the far wall of the ruins, arranged like manning, quins in a store window. They'd been dead for days, but something had preserved their bodies. Their skin was gray and their eyes were gone, but I could still recognize their faces. Tommy's chest was moving. He was still alive. The young one has been very good company, the wampus cat said. We've had such interesting conversations about respect and sacred places, and the proper punishment for trespassers. I tried to stand up, but my legs gave out. Let him go. This is between you and me. Oh, but it's not just between us anymore. She gestured toward Robert, who was still unconscious by the tree. Your friend there tried to break my curse. That makes him fair game too. She began to change again, shifting back toward human form. But she kept the claws and the yellow eyes. You want to know the truth about my curse, Ranger? The truth your Cherokee friend didn't tell you? I didn't answer, but she went on anyway. I wasn't just watching their ceremonies. I was learning them, memorizing the words, the gestures, the sacred symbols. Because I wanted to be a medicine woman too, but they said women couldn't do that kind of magic. She knelt down next to Tommy and ran one claw along his cheek. He was conscious but couldn't move or speak, just stared at me with desperate eyes. So they cursed me to be neither human nor animal, to walk alone forever between the two worlds. But they made a mistake. She smiled that terrible smile again. They gave me power, real power, and I've been using it for 200 years to protect these mountains from men who don't respect them." "Protecting them?" I found my voice again. "You're killing innocent people." "Innocent?" Her voice rose to a shriek. "They were tearing up sacred ground to build a road. They were destroying a place where my people prayed for 1,000 years so that tourists could drive their cars a little faster." I looked at Tommy, at his terrified face, and something inside me snapped. This thing might have been a victim once, but that was 200 years ago. Now she was just a killer using old pain to justify new murders. "You're right," I said quietly. "The curse was wrong. What they did to you was wrong. But that doesn't give you the right to murder people." Her yellow eyes narrowed. "You think you can judge me? You think you understand what I've suffered?" "I think you've forgotten what you were fighting for." I pulled myself to my feet, using the wall for support. "You wanted to be a medicine woman, right? Someone who heals people, who helps them." "Don't." Her voice was dangerous now. "When's the last time you helped someone? When's the last time you healed anything instead of destroying it?" She roared and lunged at me again, but this time I was ready. I rolled aside and grabbed one of Robert's obsidian arrowheads from where it had fallen. The black glass was still warm from the interrupted ceremony. The wampus cat spun around to face me, her claws spread wide. "That won't work without the proper ritual, without the right words." "Maybe not," I said, "but I know some words too. My grandmother taught me." I started speaking in Cherokee, using words I'd learned as a child but hadn't spoken in years. They were simple words, not part of any magic ceremony. Just a prayer my grandmother used to say when she was sad. "Stop," the creature said, but her voice was uncertain now. I kept talking, telling her in my broken Cherokee that I was sorry for what had happened to her. Sorry she'd been punished for wanting to learn. Sorry she'd been alone in these mountains for so long. She began to change again, but this time it was different. The cat features faded away, and for a moment she looked like a normal woman again. A woman who was tired and sad and very, very old. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember why I wanted to learn the healing songs." That's when Robert appeared behind her, moving silently despite his injuries. He had another obsidian arrowhead in his hand, and before she could react, he pressed it against the back of her neck. The effect was immediate. She screamed. Not the inhuman roar of the wampus cat, but the cry of a woman in terrible pain. Light poured out of her like she was made of sunshine, and I had to close my eyes against the glare. When the light faded, she was gone. Just gone, like she'd never been there at all. Tommy collapsed, finally able to move again. I stumbled over to him while Robert checked on Frank and Jose, but we all knew they were beyond help. "It's over," Robert said quietly. "The curse is broken. She's at peace now." I wasn't so sure about that. As we helped Tommy out of the ruins, I could have sworn I heard singing in the wind. A woman's voice, lonely and beautiful, drifting down from the high peaks where no living person could go. The official report said that Frank Miller and Jose Valdez were killed by a rabid mountain lion, and that Tommy Chen was found suffering from exposure and trauma after hiding in the woods for 4 days. The animal was never found, but the attack stopped, so everyone assumed it had died or moved on to another territory. Tommy never talked about what really happened. The doctor said his memory of those 4 days was gone, probably due to shock. But sometimes I caught him looking up at the mountains with an expression I recognized, the look of someone who's seen something they can't explain and can't forget. Robert Stormwind had a heart attack 3 weeks later while working in his garden. The doctors said it was brought on by stress and overexertion. I was the only one who knew the real cause. Breaking a curse that old, that strong, had taken everything he had. But he'd done it anyway because it was the right thing to do. I kept working as a ranger for another 6 years, until my arthritis got too bad to handle the mountain trails, but I never worked nights again. I told my supervisor it was because of what happened to Frank and Jose, and that was partly true. But the real reason was that sometimes, on clear nights when the wind was just right, I could still hear her singing. The construction project that killed Frank and Jose was permanently canceled. The state decided the environmental impact was too severe, and the Cherokee Nation successfully petitioned to have the area declared a protected cultural site. A small wooden sign now marks the spot where the workers died, but it doesn't tell the real story. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, helping Robert break the curse. The Wampus Cat was a killer, but she was also a victim, and maybe, in her twisted way, she really was protecting something sacred. But then I think about Frank's kids, who grew up without their father, about Jose's fiancée, who never got to walk down the aisle, about Tommy, who still wakes up screaming sometimes and won't tell anyone why. Whatever the Wampus Cat had been before her curse, whatever injustice had been done to her, it didn't justify what she became. The dead deserve justice, but so do the living. I retired to a small house in town, but I still drive up into the mountains sometimes. Just to check, you understand. To make sure everything's quiet. The forest feels different now. Sadder, maybe, but cleaner. Like something poison has been drained out of it. Last month, a group of hikers reported hearing singing near Pinnacle Peak. Beautiful singing, they said, like a lullaby carried on the wind. When the Park Service investigated, they didn't find anything unusual, just the normal sounds of a healthy forest. But I know better. I know that some things in these mountains don't stay dead, no matter how thoroughly you think you've laid them to rest. I know that curses have a way of finding new hosts, new reasons to exist. And I know that somewhere up in those high, lonely places, something is still watching the trails and protecting the sacred places in the only way it knows how. My name is Elizabeth Ravenheart, and I've been a park ranger for 22 years. I've seen things in these mountains that would make most people pack up and move to the city. But I'm not telling you this story to scare you away from the woods. I'm telling you because the mountains deserve respect. The old places, the sacred places, they have power that goes back further than any of us can imagine. Respect that power. Stay on the marked trails. Don't disturb things that look old or ceremonial. And if you're ever camping in Daniel Boone National Forest and you hear a woman singing in the darkness, don't go looking for her. Some songs are meant to be heard from a distance, and some singers are better left alone. My name is Michael Thornfield, and I've been a park ranger for 22 years. I've tracked black bears through thick woods, helped lost hikers find their way home, and seen just about everything these mountains can throw at you. But I'm telling you this story because what happened on Grandfather Mountain in June of 1985 changed everything I thought I knew about the world. I never believed in monsters, Bigfoot, forest giants, all that nonsense. It was just stories to sell books and get on TV. I was a hunter before I became a ranger, and I knew what lived in these woods. Bears, deer, maybe a mountain lion, if you were lucky enough to spot one. Nothing more. But that summer was different. The heat had been crushing for weeks, and the drought was the worst anyone could remember. The streams were running low, and even the toughest animals were struggling to find water. That's when the calls started coming in. Ranger Station, this is Mark Peterson. My son's camping group saw something up on Grandfather Mountain. Something big. I set down my coffee and grabbed a pen. What kind of something, sir? They said it was a bear, but it was walking on two legs, 10 feet tall, maybe more. I'd heard this before. City kids go camping, see a bear stand up to look around, and suddenly it's King Kong. Bears do that sometimes, Mr. Peterson, when they're curious or trying to get a better view. For over a minute, walking across a clearing like a person? That made me pause. Bears don't walk upright for long, it's too hard on them. Where exactly are they camped? Near the old Cherokee Trail, about 2 miles up from the parking area. I knew that spot. It was remote, with thick trees and rocky ground that made hiking tough. Not many people went up there, which was probably why his son's group picked it. I'll head up there this afternoon and take a look. Thank you. And Ranger Thornfield, my son David is up there. He's only 16. After I hung up, I sat back in my chair. David Peterson, I knew that name. Smart kid, came on some of our nature walks with his scout group. If he said he saw something strange, it was worth checking out. I loaded my truck with the usual gear: tranquilizer gun, first aid kit, radio, and plenty of water. The plan was simple: find the kids, make sure they were safe, and figure out what kind of animal they'd seen. Probably a big black bear that was acting weird because of the heat. The drive up to Grandfather Mountain took 40 minutes on winding roads that got narrower as they climbed. The parking area was almost empty, just a few cars belonging to serious hikers who didn't mind the heat. I strapped on my pack and started up the trail. The woods felt wrong right away. Too quiet. After 22 years out here, you learn to read the forest like a book. There should have been birds singing, squirrels chattering, insects buzzing. Instead, I heard nothing but my own footsteps on the dry leaves. I stopped and listened. Sometimes you can hear bears moving through the brush, especially big ones. But the silence was complete, like someone had turned off all the sound in the world. The trail wound up through thick rhododendron bushes and past huge granite rocks. This was Cherokee land once, and they had stories about giants living in these mountains. Old legends about creatures that protected the sacred places. I'd always figured they were just tales to keep people away from dangerous areas. After an hour of hiking, I found the campsite. 3 small tents were set up in a clearing with a fire ring made of stones. But something was off. The tents looked disturbed. Not torn or damaged, but pushed around, like something big had walked through them. "Hello?" I called out. "Park Service." No answer. I walked closer and saw that one tent had been moved about 3 feet from where it was staked down. The aluminum poles were bent in ways that shouldn't have been possible, curved like someone had grabbed them and twisted them like bread dough. That's when I found the footprint. It was in a patch of soft dirt near the fire ring, and it was huge, 18 inches long, maybe 8 inches wide, with 5 clear toe marks. But it wasn't a bare print. It was shaped like a human foot, just enormous. I knelt down and put my hand next to it for size. My hand looked like a child's next to that print. Whatever made this track had to weigh at least 800 pounds, maybe more. I stood up and looked around the campsite again. Now I noticed other things. Branches broken off trees about 10 feet up, way higher than any bear could reach. Scratch marks on tree bark that were too wide and too high. And that smell, musky, wild, like a zoo on a hot day. My radio crackled to life. "Michael, you up there?" It was Sandra Whitehawk, the wildlife biologist who worked with our department. "Yeah, I'm at the campsite. Sandra, you need to see this." "What did you find?" I looked down at the giant footprint. "I'm not sure, but whatever those kids saw, it wasn't a bear." Sandra arrived 2 hours later, carrying her field kit and camera. She was Cherokee, from a family that had lived in these mountains for generations, and she knew more about wildlife than anyone I'd ever met. If anyone could make sense of what I'd found, it was her. "Show me," she said, setting down her pack. I led her to the footprint. She stared at it for a long moment, then knelt down like I had. "This is impossible," she said quietly. "That's what I thought. But there it is." She took out her measuring tape and camera. 18.5 inches long, 7 3/4 inches wide. She snapped photos from different angles. "Michael, do you know what this means? That we've got a problem? This footprint belongs to something that walks upright and weighs close to 1,000 pounds. There's no animal in North America that matches this." I pointed to the bent tent poles. "Look at this. Aluminum doesn't bend like that unless you use a lot of force." Sandra examined the poles and shook her head. "A black bear weighs maybe 300 pounds. Even a really big one wouldn't bend these." She looked around the campsite. "Where are the campers?" "That's what we need to find out. Mr. Peterson said there were 5 boys, including his son, David." We spent the next hour searching the area around the campsite. The boys had left gear behind: sleeping bags, food, cooking supplies. Whatever had scared them, they'd left in a hurry. About a 1/4 mile up the trail, Sandra found something that made my blood run cold. It was another footprint, this one in a muddy spot near a stream. But next to it was a human handprint pressed deep into the mud. They were running, Sandra said. Look at the spacing between the human footprints. They were moving fast. The trail led higher up the mountain, toward the rocky peaks where the old Cherokee stories said the giants lived. As we followed it, I noticed more signs of the creature. Broken branches, more huge footprints, and that wild smell getting stronger. My radio started making static noises, which was weird because we usually had good reception up here. I tried calling the ranger station but got nothing but white noise. Equipment's acting up, I told Sandra. Mine too. She was trying to use her GPS unit, but the screen kept flickering. Something's interfering with the electronics. We kept climbing. The trail got steeper and rockier, winding between huge granite boulders. This was tough country. If someone got hurt up here, it would be hard to get them down. That's when we heard it. A roar echoed across the mountain, so deep and loud that I felt it in my chest. It wasn't like any animal sound I'd ever heard. Not a bear, not a mountain lion, not anything I could identify. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the rocks and rolling through the valleys. Sandra grabbed my arm. What was that? Before I could answer, the roar came. Again, longer this time. Birds erupted from the trees below us, flying away from the mountain as fast as they could. Even the insects went quiet. We need to find those boys, I said, checking my tranquilizer gun. The safety was off, and I had 6 darts loaded. Whatever was up here, I hoped 6 would be enough. The trail led to a rock face with caves carved into it. Some looked natural. Others seemed almost like doorways cut by human hands. The smell was strongest here, and I could see more footprints in the dirt. Michael, Sandra whispered, look at this. She was pointing at the rock wall about 12 feet up. There, pressed into the stone like it was soft clay, was a handprint. It was huge, easily twice the size of my hand, and the fingers had left deep gouges in the granite. That's impossible, I said. Rock doesn't give way like that. Unless you're incredibly strong, Sandra said. Strong enough to press your hand into stone like it was mud. We found the boys in the 3rd cave we checked. All 5 of them were huddled together in the back, alive but scared out of their minds. David Peterson looked up when our flashlight beams found them. Ranger Thornfield? Is that really you? It's me, son. Are you boys hurt? They weren't injured, but they'd been hiding in that cave for almost 6 hours. David told us what happened while Sandra checked the other boys for injuries. We were sitting around the fire last night when we heard something moving in the woods. Mark thought it was a bear, so we made noise to scare it away. But then it stepped into the clearing. What did it look like? David's voice shook. Like a person, but huge. Maybe 11 feet tall, covered in dark hair. Its eyes. They glowed in the firelight like a cat's but bigger. It just stood there looking at us for maybe a minute. Then what happened? It let out this roar that made our ears rinse. We grabbed what we could and ran. We've been hiding up here ever since. I helped the boys gather their things while Sandra took more photos of the cave. The walls had strange markings on them, not quite writing but not random scratches either. They looked old, really old. Michael, Sandra called from deeper in the cave, you need to see this. I left the boys by the entrance and followed her flashlight beam. The cave went back further than I'd thought, opening into a bigger chamber. And there, scattered across the floor, were bones. Human bones. Some looked old, others more recent. They weren't arranged randomly. Someone or something had placed them carefully, almost like a shrine. How many people? I asked. Sandra knelt by the bones, examining them with her flashlight. At least a dozen, maybe more. She picked up a skull and showed me the back of it. Look at this. The skull had been crushed, but not by falling rocks or an accident. Something with incredible strength had squeezed it like an egg. We need to get these boys off this mountain, I said. Now. As we led the boys back down the trail, I kept looking over my shoulder. I had the feeling we were being watched, that something was following us just out of sight. The shadows between the trees seemed deeper than they should be, and every snapping twig made me jump. We made it back to the campsite without trouble, But as we packed up the boys' gear, Sandra grabbed my arm. "Listen," she whispered. From somewhere up the mountain came the sound of heavy footsteps. Not running, just walking slowly and deliberately down the trail toward us. Each step shook the ground slightly, like a small earthquake. "Everyone to the trucks," I said quietly. "Now." We got the boys down to the parking area as fast as we could. As they drove away with their parents, I stood next to my truck and looked back up the mountain. So, something was moving in the tree line, something big and dark. For just a moment, I saw two glowing eyes looking down at us. Then they disappeared, and the mountain was quiet again. The next morning, I was back at the ranger station filing my report when Sandra burst through the door. She looked like she hadn't slept all night. "Michael, we have a problem, a big problem." She spread her laptop on my desk and showed me the photos she'd taken. The footprint measurements, the handprint in the rock, the bent tent poles. It was all there, clear as day. "I sent these to a friend at the university," she said. "Someone who studies unknown animals. He called me at 6 this morning." "What did he say?" "He wants to know where I faked these photos." I stared at the screen. "He thinks they're fake?" "He says nothing this big walks upright in North America. The bone structure wouldn't support it. The muscle mass would be impossible. But Michael, we both saw that print in person." She clicked to another photo, the hair samples she'd collected from the trees around the campsite. "I sent these to a lab for DNA testing. The results came back this morning. And? Unknown species. The lab tech said it's closest to human DNA, but with differences they can't explain. He asked if I was sure I didn't mix up samples from different animals." My phone rang. It was the sheriff's office. "Ranger Thornfield, this is Deputy Martinez. We've got hikers missing on Grandfather Mountain, a couple from Florida, last seen yesterday evening." I felt my stomach drop. "Where exactly?" "They were headed for the same trail where those boys had their incident. Their car's still in the parking lot." I looked at Sandra. "We're going back up there." "Michael, maybe we should call for backup, get a search team, some other rangers." "And tell them what? That we're looking for a giant monster? They'll think we've lost our minds." She was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother used to tell stories about these mountains, about guardians that protected the sacred places. I always thought they were just Lee and Jen's." "Maybe they were," I said, grabbing my gear. "But something's up there, and now we've got missing people." The hike up to the campsite area took us an hour. This time I brought more than just a tranquilizer gun. I had a rifle loaded with high-powered rounds, flares, and a satellite phone that might work better than the radio. We found the missing couple's campsite right away, or what was left of it. The tent had been shredded, not by claws, but by something that had grabbed it and torn it apart with brute force. Their backpacks were scattered around the clearing, contents spilled everywhere. But there was no blood, no signs of a fight. "It's like they just vanished," Sandra said, examining the torn fabric. I found more of the huge footprints, but these were different. Deeper, pressed harder into the earth, like whatever made them had been angry or excited. The prints led away from the campsite and up toward the rocky peaks. "We're following them," I said. "Michael, that might not be smart. If this thing killed those people, we don't know that they're dead. Maybe it took them somewhere, like it did with the boys." The trail led higher than we'd gone before, into country I'd only visited a few times in my career. This was rough land. Steep climbs, loose rocks, and drops that could kill you if you weren't careful. After 2 hours of climbing, we found something that made me stop cold. Trees had been snapped off about 20 feet up the trunk. Not cut or broken by wind. Snapped cleanly, like someone had grabbed them and twisted them until they broke. Some of the broken trees had been thrown around the area like spears. "What could do this?" Sandra asked, touching one of the broken trunks. "Something incredibly strong and angry." The trail of destruction led to a cliff face with a deep cave opening. The smell was overwhelming here, that wild animal scent, mixed with something else. Something rotting. "I don't like this," Sandra said. "Maybe we should go back and get help." But before I could answer, we heard voices. Human voices, calling for help from inside the cave. "Hello?" I shouted. "This is Park Service. Are you hurt?" "Help us," came the reply. please, we're trapped." I looked at Sandra. That's got to be the missing couple. It could be a trap. Or they could be dying in there while we stand here talking. I turned on my flashlight and stepped into the cave. It was bigger than the one where we'd found the boys, much bigger. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and I could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance. "Keep calling," I shouted. "We're coming to get you!" "This way!" The voices seemed to come from deeper in the cave system. We followed a narrow passage that opened into a huge underground chamber. Our flashlight beams barely reached the walls. And there, huddled against the far wall, were a man and woman in their 30s. "Thank God," the man said as we reached them. "I'm Tom Harrison. This is my wife, Lisa. We've been trapped here since yesterday." "What happened to you?" Sandra asked, checking them for injuries. "We were sleeping when something grabbed our tent," Lisa said. Her voice was shaking. "Something huge. It picked up the whole tent with us inside and carried us here." "Did you see what it was?" Tom nodded. 11 feet tall, covered in dark hair. It walked on 2 legs like a person, but it was stronger than anything I've ever seen. It carried our tent like it weighed nothing. "Why did it bring you here?" I asked. "I don't think it wanted to hurt us," Lisa said. "More like it was protecting something. Every time we tried to leave, it would block the entrance and push us back." That's when I heard it. A low growling from the tunnel we'd come through. Something big was moving in the darkness behind us. "Everyone stay calm," I whispered, pulling out my rifle. "Stay behind me." The growling got louder, and I could hear heavy footsteps echoing off the cave walls. My flashlight beam caught movement in the tunnel entrance, something large and dark. Then it stepped into the chamber. I'd seen bears, mountain lions, even wolves in my 22 years as a ranger. But this was something else entirely. It stood upright like a person, but was easily 11 feet tall and covered in dark, matted hair. Its arms reached almost to its knees, and its hands ended in fingers the size of sausages. But the eyes were what really got to me. They glowed in my flashlight beam, but there was something behind them. Intelligence. "Nobody move," I said quietly. The creature looked at us for a long moment, then let out a roar that shook rocks loose from the ceiling. The sound was so loud it hurt my ears and made my chest vibrate. It took a step toward us, and I raised my rifle. "Stay back!" But instead of attacking, it pointed toward a side tunnel I hadn't noticed before. Then it roared again and pointed more urgently. "I think it wants us to go that way," Sandra whispered. "We're not going anywhere with that thing." The creature took another step forward, and this time I could smell its breath, like rotting meat and wild animals. It pointed at the tunnel again, more insistently. "Michael," Sandra said, "what if it's trying to help us?" "Help us? It kidnapped these people." "But they're not hurt, and it could have killed them easily if it wanted to." The creature let out a softer sound, almost like it was trying to communicate. Then it turned and walked toward the side tunnel, looking back at us expectantly. "I think we should follow it," Tom said. "It's been almost gentle with us, scary as hell, but not violent." Against every instinct I had, we followed the creature through the side tunnel. It led us through a maze of passages I never would have found on my own, moving with surprising grace for something so big. After 10 minutes of walkies, we saw daylight ahead. The creature had led us to another cave entrance, this one much closer to the main trail. As we stepped outside, the creature stopped at the cave mouth. It looked at each of us in turn, then let out a long, low call that echoed across the mountains. From somewhere in the distance, another call answered it. "There's more than one," Sandra said quietly. The creature turned and disappeared back into the cave, leaving us standing in the afternoon sun. "We need to get you two to a hospital," I told Tom and Lisa. "Make sure you're okay." As we helped them down the mountain, I kept thinking about those intelligent eyes. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't just an animal. It was something else entirely. And it was protecting something on this mountain. That evening, I drove to Sandra's house to talk about what we'd seen. She lived in a small cabin outside town with her grandmother. an elderly Cherokee woman who knew more about the old stories than anyone alive. "Tell her what we found," Sandra said as we sat around the kitchen table. I described the creature, the caves, the way it had helped us rescue Tom and Lisa. Sandra's grandmother listened without saying a word, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke in Cherokee to Sandra, who translated. "She says you met the mountain guardian. Her people called them the Kekla Kudla, the stone giants. They've protected the sacred places for thousands of years." "You mean this thing is, what, supernatural?" The old woman spoke again, and Sandra translated. "She says they're both physical and spiritual, ancient spirits that took solid form to protect the mountain from those who would harm it." "But why are they showing themselves now?" Sandra asked her grandmother, who thought for a moment before answering. "Because something is threatening the mountain, something that requires them to be more active." I thought about the construction crews that had been working in the area, the new development plans, the increased tourism. What kind of threat? Before Sandra could translate, my satellite phone rang. It was the emergency dispatch. "Ranger Thornfield, we have a situation. Construction crew working on the new resort project went missing this afternoon. All 5 men." My blood went cold. "Where?" "North side of Grandfather Mountain. They were clearing trees for the access road." I looked at Sandra. "The resort project. They're building right through the heart of the sacred area. My grandmother says the guardians won't allow it. They'll protect the mountain at any cost. We need to find those workers before someone gets killed." The drive to the construction site took us 40 minutes on back roads I'd never used before. The development company had been cutting a road up the mountain for their new resort, a massive project that would bring hundreds of tourists into the area every year. We found the construction equipment abandoned in a clearing. A bulldozer sat half buried under a pile of logs that looked like they'd been thrown there. 2 chainsaws lay on the ground, their chains snapped. And everywhere, those massive footprints. "There," Sandra pointed toward the tree line. I saw movement in the shadows, something big walking between the trees. But this time, it wasn't alone. I counted at least 3 separate figures, all of them huge. "A family group," I said. "They're working together." We followed the trail of broken equipment and scattered tools up the mountain. The creatures had been busy. They'd destroyed everything the construction crew had brought up here, dismantling machines like they were children's toys. The trail led to a natural amphitheater formed by rock walls. And there, sitting against the far wall under the watchful eyes of 4 creatures, were the 5 missing workers. The men looked terrified, but unharmed. The creatures had arranged themselves in a semicircle around them. 3 adults, and what looked like a juvenile. The largest one, probably the alpha male, stood over 12 feet tall. "Nobody move," I whispered to Sandra. "Let me try to handle this." I stepped into the clearing with my hands visible and empty. The alpha creature looked at me and let out a low rumble, not threatening, but definitely a warning. "I know you," I said, surprising myself. "You're the one who helped us in the cave." The creature tilted its head, almost like it was listening. I took another step forward. These men didn't know they were trespassing on sacred ground. They were just doing their jobs. The alpha made a sound that might have been communication with the others. The smaller ones shifted position but didn't approach. "If I promise they won't come back, will you let them go?" For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the alpha pointed at the destroyed construction equipment, then at the workers, then at the trail leading down the mountain. "I understand," I said. "No more machines, no more cutting trees, no more resort." The creature nodded, and stepped aside. The workers scrambled to their feet and ran toward us, not stopping to look back. As we led them down the mountain, I could feel the creatures watching us go. When we reached the construction site, the alpha let out a long call that echoed across the valleys. From different parts of the mountain, other calls answered. "How many are there?" Sandra asked. "I don't know, but enough to protect this whole mountain range." The workers were in shock, but alive. As we drove them back to town, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I'm going to make sure this development project gets canceled, I told Sandra. How? Whatever it takes. These creatures have been guarding this mountain for thousands of years. I'm not going to let some resort company destroy their home. That night, I called the state environmental office, the Cherokee Tribal Council, and every conservation group I could find. I told them about the rare wildlife habitat, the cultural significance of the area, and the safety concerns for tourists. I didn't mention the creatures. I knew no one would believe me, but I made sure that resort never got built. That was 30 years ago. I retired from the Park Service in 2010, but I still live near Grandfather Mountain. I still hike the trails, though I stay away from the sacred areas unless I'm invited. Because yes, they still invite me sometimes. Over the years, I've had maybe a dozen encounters with the Guardians. Usually just glimpses. A shadow moving between trees, glowing eyes watching from a ridge, massive footprints that appear overnight after construction crews get too close to protected areas. The creatures keep their part of the bargain. They stay hidden, avoid contact with tourists, and don't hurt anyone who respects the mountain. But they also keep their promise to protect the sacred places. 3 different development projects have been mysteriously canceled over the years. Equipment breakdowns, environmental concerns, technical difficulties that make construction impossible. The creatures are smarter than people give them credit for. Sandra became the chief wildlife biologist for the state park system. She never talks publicly about what we saw, but she makes sure the right areas stay protected. Her grandmother passed away in 1995, but not before teaching Sandra all the old stories about the mountain guardians. Tom and Lisa Harrison still send me Christmas cards every year. They never told anyone what really happened to them on the mountain. Who would believe them? But they became major donors to wilderness preservation groups across the country. The construction workers all quit their jobs within a month of the incident. One of them moved to Florida and swore he'd never go hiking again. Another became a forest ranger himself, saying he wanted to protect the places that need protecting. I never saw Sand, Bra's colleague again, the one who died in the first cave. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined that part, if the stress and fear made me remember things that didn't happen. But then I visit her, grave in the Cherokee Cemetery, and I know it was all real. As for the creatures themselves, the Kekla-Kudla, the stone giants, whatever you want to call them, they're still up there, still watching, still protecting. Just last month, a hiker reported seeing something impossible on the North Ridge. A family from Ohio swears they saw a bear walking like a person near the old Cherokee Trail. The Park Service puts out warnings about bear activity and tells people to make noise when hiking. But I know better. I know they're not bears. I know they're not just animals. They're guardians of something ancient and sacred, something that connects us to the time before roads and cities and development projects. And I know that as long as there are wild places left to protect, they'll be there watching over them. Sometimes, late at night when the wind is blowing through the mountains, I can hear them calling to each other across the ridges. Long, low calls that sound almost like singing. It's a lonely sound, but not a sad one. It's the sound of something wild and free that refuses to disappear. I'm 78 years old now, and I don't hike the high trails like I used to. But every few months, I drive up to the old campsite area and leave some apples or honey by the trail. They're always gone by morning. Call it respect. Call it payment for services rendered. Call it whatever you want. I call it keeping a promise to the guardians of Grandfather Mountain. And if you ever find yourself hiking in these mountains, remember what I've told you. Respect the old places. Stay on the marked trails. Don't cut trees or leave trash or make plans to build where you shouldn't, because they're still watching, and they remember everything. My name is Gabriel Thornfield, and I've been a park ranger for 15 years. I'm telling you this story because someone needs to know what really happened in the fall of '76. What they told the newspapers wasn't the truth, not even close. I grew up in these West Virginia mountains. My daddy worked the coal mines until black lung took him when I was 12. After that, Mama raised me and my two sisters by herself. I swore I'd never go underground like Daddy did. That's why I became a ranger. Wanted to work under open sky, not buried in the dark. By October of '76, I was 41 years old. Divorced. My two boys lived with their mother in Charleston. I saw them every other weekend when I could get away from Seneca Rocks. The divorce was my fault, really. I worked too much. Stayed in the mountains too long. Sarah tried to make it work, but eventually she got tired of being alone. Her brother Mark became a scout leader after the divorce. I think he did it to prove he was better with kids than me. Maybe he was right. That October, he was leading a troop of 12 boys on a weekend camping trip in Monongahela National Forest. Cave exploration was on the schedule. Mark knew these mountains pretty well, and the forecast looked clear. I never believed in the old stories. Hollow walkers, ghost lights, Tommyknockers in the mines. My grandmother used to tell tales about spirits that lived in the abandoned shafts, but I figured that was just mountain superstition, stories to keep kids from wandering into dangerous places. The morning of October 15th started normal enough. Heavy fog rolled through the hollows like it does that time of year. Early frost made everything look silver and dead. I was at the ranger station filling out paperwork when the call came through. Gabriel, we got a problem. It was dispatch. Boy Scout troop was supposed to check in 2 hours ago. Mark Brennan, his group. My stomach dropped. Which trail? Seneca Creek area. They had permits for the limestone caves near the old Blackwell mine. The Blackwell mine. I felt cold all over. That shaft had been sealed since 1847 after 47 miners got trapped in a collapse. They never recovered the bodies. The entrance was welded shut with steel plates and covered in warning signs. Nobody went near that place. I'll head out now, I said. Call Jake Ashworth. Tell him to meet me at the Seneca Creek trailhead. I grabbed my pack and drove the 15 miles to the trailhead. The fog was getting thicker. By the time I parked my truck, I could barely see 50 feet ahead. Jake's truck was already there. He was standing by the trail sign, looking worried. Jake was maybe 50 years old, lean and tough like old rope. He'd been a ranger for 20 years, fought in Korea. He didn't scare easy. 12 boys and 1 adult, Jake said. 6 hours overdue now. Mark knows these trails, I said. He wouldn't get lost. Maybe somebody got hurt. Broken ankle, snake bite. Maybe. We headed up the trail. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no squirrels. Just our boots on the path and our breathing in the cold air. The fog moved weird, against the wind, like it had its own ideas about where to go. 2 miles in, we found their campsite. Tents still standing. Food hung properly in bear bags. Nothing disturbed. They packed light for caving, Jake said, checking one of the tents. Left most of their gear here. I found Mark's trail notes in his tent. He'd written down their route. They planned to explore Morrison Cave, a safe, well-mapped limestone formation about half a mile west. Easy cave for beginners. Nothing dangerous. Let's check Morrison Cave, I said. We followed the trail west. That's when things started feeling wrong. My flashlight kept dimming even though I'd put in fresh battery, as that morning. Jake's compass was spinning in slow circles instead of pointing north. Equipment's acting funny, Jake said. Magnetic rock, maybe. Maybe. We found the entrance to Morrison Cave. Nobody there. But there were footprints in the mud. Small ones, kid-sized. The prints headed away from Morrison Cave, back toward the trail. We followed them. The footprints led us east, then north. Then they went straight off the trail into thick brush. We pushed through the undergrowth, following the tracks. That's when I saw it. The steel plates covering the Blackwell mine entrance were torn open, not rusted through, not pried apart carefully. Torn. Like something with enormous strength had ripped them from the inside out. The metal was bent outward, edges sharp and twisted, and leading right through that opening were dozens of small footprints. Jesus Christ, Jake whispered. I knelt down by the entrance. The footprints were fresh, made within the last few hours, and they only went one direction, into the mine. Mark wouldn't take those boys in there, I said. He's not stupid. Then what happened? I didn't have an answer. The mine entrance was a black mouth in the hillside. Cold air breathed out of it, carrying a smell like old pennies and wet stone. And something else, something rotten. From deep inside, so faint I almost missed it, came a sound. Children screaming. Did you hear that? I grabbed Jake's arm. He nodded, face pale. We need backup. No time. Those kids are down there. Now. I tried my radio. Nothing but static. We were in one of the dead zones, hollows so deep that radio signals couldn't reach. The nearest ranger station was 20 miles away. By the time we hiked out and got help, those boys could be dead from bad air or cave-ins or hypothermia. We go in, I said. Careful and slow, we find them and we get out. Jake pulled out his flashlight. I don't like this, Gabriel. Me neither. We stepped into the Blackwell mine. The tunnel was maybe 6 feet tall and 8 feet wide. Old timber supports held up the ceiling, wood so rasant. Often it crumbled when I touched it. The floor was covered in thick dust, the kind that builds up over a century of nothing but darkness and silence. Our flashlight beams cut through the blackness. The footprints were clear in the dust, small sneaker prints, and bigger boot prints that had to be marks. They came through here recently, Jake said, kneeling to examine the tracks. Maybe 3 hours ago. But why? Mark knows better. Maybe the boys went in first. Maybe he followed to get them out. That made sense. Kids do stupid things. I could imagine a few boys daring each other to explore the forbidden mine. Mark would have had no choice but to follow. We moved deeper. The tunnel sloped downward. Side passages branched off into complete darkness. I marked our path with chalk on the walls. Old caver's trick my daddy taught me. Every 50 feet or so, we'd call out, "Mark, can you hear us? This is Park Service." Nothing but echoes. The air got colder. Our breath came out in white clouds. My flashlight kept dimming. I smacked it a few times and it brightened, but I could tell the batteries were dying way too fast. "This doesn't make sense," Jake said. "These batteries should last 8 hours. Keep moving." We passed old mining equipment, rusted pickaxes, broken carts on rails that went nowhere. A lunch pail sitting on a rock ledge like someone had just put it down for a moment. But the pail was covered in rust and dust. Nobody had touched it in more than 100 years. 100 yards in, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Old wooden supports crisscrossed the ceiling, railway tracks ran along the floor, and in the center of the chamber, we found the first piece of real evidence, a Boy Scout neckerchief, red with a white border. I picked it up, still damp, fresh. "They were definitely here," I said. That's when Jake grabbed my shoulder. "Gabriel, look at this." He was pointing at the ground. The footprints continued across the chamber toward a tunnel on the far side. But there was something else in the dust. Other footprints, bigger ones, made by heavy work boots, old-fashioned boots, the kind miners wore in the 1800s. "Could be from before they sealed the mine," I said, but I didn't believe it. "In dust this thick?" Jake shook his head. "These prints were made recently, same time as the boys." The work boot prints followed the boys' tracks, like something had been walking behind them, following them deeper into the mine. "Maybe old Mark brought period footwear for some history lesson," I said, trying to convince myself. Jake didn't answer. He was staring at something on the wall. Scratched into the stone were words. Fresh scratches, not old. The letters looked like they'd been carved with fingernails. "They're awake." "We need to get those kids out," Jake said. "Right now." We moved faster. The tunnel got narrower. The ceiling dropped until we had to duck our heads. Water dripped from somewhere, each drop echoing like a hammer strike. I heard something ahead. A scraping sound. Metal on stone. "Mark?" I called out. "That you?" The scraping stopped. Then, from the darkness ahead, I heard breathing. Slow and wet, like someone with fluid in their lungs. "Identify yourself," Jake said, his voice harder now. Military voice. Something moved in the darkness beyond our flashlight beams. A shape. Man-sized. "Sir, this is Park Service," I said. "We're here to help. Are you hurt?" The shape moved closer. My flashlight beam touched it. For just a second, I saw a face. A man's face, pale as snow. Eyes completely black, no whites at all. Mouth open way too wide, and his clothes were wrong. Old-fashioned mining clothes. Canvas pants. Suspenders. But they were torn and rotting like they'd been buried for 100 years. Then he was gone. Just vanished into a side tunnel. "Tell me you saw that," Jake whispered. "I saw it." "What the hell was it?" "I don't know. But we need to find those boys." We kept moving. The tunnel split in to 3 branches. The footprints, both the boys and those old work boots, went down the middle passage. We followed. My hands were shaking. I've worked in these mountains for 15 years. I've dealt with bears, rattlesnakes, lost hikers, avalanches. I don't scare easy. But whatever I'd just seen wasn't natural, wasn't right. The middle tunnel opened into another chamber, bigger this time, and there, in the middle of the floor, was a mining cart sitting on old rails. Inside the cart were 3 boys. They weren't moving. "Jesus!" Jake ran forward. "Boys, can you hear me?" I was right behind him. The 3 boys were slumped in the cart like dolls. They were maybe 12 years old. Boy Scout uniforms. Their skin was white. Too white. Jake checked the first boy's pulse. His face went gray. "He's dead, Gabriel, cold. Been dead for hours." I checked the second boy. Same thing. Dead and cold. The third boy, young kid with red hair and freckles, was also gone. "How?" I said. "What killed them?" There were no injuries I could see, no blood, no signs of violence. They just looked like they'd fallen asleep and never woken up. But their eyes were open, and they were completely black, just like that thing I'd seen in the tunnel. "Where are the others?" Jake was looking around wildly. "There should be 9 more boys in Mark." I saw marks in the dust, drag marks, like bodies had been pulled deeper into the mine. "They went that way." I pointed to another tunnel. "We have to—" A sound cut me off. A voice. Singing. Someone was singing an old song, the kind miners used to sing while they worked. The voice echoed through the tunnels, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Down in the mine where the sun don't shine, digging for coal till the end of time." "That's not Mark," Jake said. "No." More voices joined in. A dozen voices, maybe more, all singing the same song, getting G louder. "We need to get out," Jake said. "Right now. Get help and come back with a real team." He was right. This was beyond us. We needed police, maybe the FBI. Something was very wrong in this mine. We turned to go back the way we'd come. The tunnel behind us was blocked. Rocks and timber had collapsed across the passage, completely sealed. But we hadn't heard any collapse. The tunnel had been clear 30 seconds ago. "That's impossible," I said. Jake was already pulling at the rocks. They didn't move. The collapse was total. Tons of stone and wood. "The other way," Jake said. "We'll find another exit." We went deeper into the mine. We had no choice. The singing continued, closer now, and I started to smell something. That rotten smell from the entrance, but stronger, like meat gone bad, like something dead. We passed more chambers, more old equipment, and in one chamber, I saw them. Bodies. Dozens of bodies. Miners in old-fashioned clothes sitting against the walls, lying on the floor. Preserved somehow in the cold, dry air of the mine. Their skin was like leather. Eyes sunken. Mouths open. The 47 miners who'd been trapped in the 1847 collapse. They'd never been recovered because nobody could reach them. And here they were. Still here after more than 100 years. "Oh God," Jake said. "We need to—" One of the bodies moved. Its head turned. Looked right at us with empty eye sockets. Then it stood up. Then they all stood up. 47 dead miners, rising to their feet, turning toward us, moving. "Run!" Jake screamed. We ran. The miners came after us, not fast, but steady, walking with a terrible purpose, their work boots scraping on stone, that wet breathing sound coming from all of them at once. We burst into another tunnel, ran blindly. My flashlight was almost dead now, just a dim yellow glow. Jake's was completely out. "There," I pointed. Light ahead. Real light. Daylight filtering down through cracks in the ceiling. A way out. We ran toward it. Behind us, the miners were getting closer. I could hear them, smell them, the light coming in from a vertical shaft. Old ventilation shaft, maybe. It went straight up about 40 feet. I could see blue sky at the top. "We can climb it," Jake said. "Rocks sticking out, handholds. You first, I'll cover you. Gabriel, go!" Jake started climbing. He was good at it, fast, 20 feet up in less than a minute. I turned around. The miners were entering the chamber, a dozen of them, then more. Their faces were horrible up close, flesh hanging off in strips, bones showing through. But their eyes were alive, black and shining and full of hate. The lead miner pointed at me. His jaw opened and that singing came out again. But it wasn't words anymore. It was a sound that made my bones hurt. Jake was 30 feet up, almost at the top. The miners rushed forward. I pulled out my service revolver, shot the lead miner in the chest. The bullet hit him. I saw the impact, but he didn't stop, didn't even slow down. I fired again, emptied the whole cylinder. They kept coming. I turned and jumped for the shaft, grabbed a handhold, started climbing. Dead hands grabbed my boots. "Gabriel!" Jake was at the top, reaching down. "Climb!" I kicked. My boot came off in a dead miner's hand. I kept climbing, one hand over the other. My fingers were bleeding. The miners were climbing after me now, just as fast as I was, 20 feet from the top. Below me, the miners were stacked up in the shaft, climbing over each other, reaching for me. 10 feet. Jake grabbed my hand, pulled me up. We collapsed on the surface, gasping. We were in a small clearing. The Blackwell mine was a quarter-mile to the south. We'd come out through an old ventilation shaft that I didn't even know existed. "We made it," Jake was laughing, crazy relieved laughing. A hand burst through the ground next to him. A dead miner pulled itself out of the earth, right out of solid ground it was water, then another, and another. They could move through rock, through solid stone. "The truck!" I screamed. We ran. Through the forest, branches whipping our faces. The miners came, after us. More of them now, coming from all directions, rising out of the ground, stepping out from behind trees. I saw something worse. Mark, my ex-brother-in-law, walking toward us with that same dead expression. His eyes were black, his skin was pale. "Mark?" I said. He opened his mouth. That terrible singing came out. He wasn't Mark anymore. He was one of them now. We kept running. My lungs burned. My legs felt like rubber. But I could see the trail now, see where we'd parked the trucks. We broke out of the trees. The trucks were there, 50 yards away. Behind us, the miners poured out of the forest, dozens of them, maybe more than 100, all singing that horrible song. We were almost to the trucks when Jake fell. I heard the sound, like a crack, like wood breaking. I turned around. Jake was on the ground. There was a mining pickaxe sticking out of his chest. The lead miner stood over him, the same one I'd shot. He pulled the pickaxe out. Jake's blood was bright red on the blade. "Jake!" I ran back. The miner swung the pickaxe at me. I ducked, felt the air move above my head. I grabbed Jake's arms, tried to drag him, but there was so much blood. Too much. "Go," Jake whispered. "Get out." "No. Tell my wife." He died. Right there. Looking at me with wide eyes that slowly went empty. The miners surrounded us. I should have died right there in that clearing. The miners stood in a circle around me, blocking every escape route. The lead miner, the one who'd killed Jake, stepped forward. He was holding that bloody pickaxe. Up close, I could see his face better. Most of his flesh was gone. Just leather brown skin stretched over bones. but I could read what was left of his expression. Hunger. He reached for me with hands that were mostly bone. Those black eyes locked onto mine. And then I heard it, not with my ears, but inside my head. A voice. Join us, Thornfee. Ild. Dig with us. Forever. That's when I understood. These weren't just ghosts. These were the 47 miners who died in the 1847 collapse, trapped underground, starved to death in the darkness. And somehow, their hate and suffering had turned them into something else. Something that could pull living people into the darkness with them. The Boy Scouts. Mark. They'd been taken, converted, added to the collection. And I was next. The lead miner's hand touched my face. His skin felt like ice. My vision started going dark around the edges. I felt cold spreading through my chest, like falling into frozen water. Work in the dark, forever and ever. My hand found something in my jacket pocket, my backup lighter. I always carried one for emergencies. My fingers were numb, but I managed to flick it open. The flame was tiny, orange and weak. But when I held it up, the miners pulled back, just a few inches, like the light hurt them somehow. I remembered something my grandmother used to tell me, old mountain superstition. She said miners used to bless their lanterns before going underground, pray over them, make them holy, because light in the darkness wasn't just light, it was protection, it was hope. It kept the bad things away. My lighter wasn't blessed, but it was light, and right now, that was all I had. I held it up high. Get back! The miners retreated further. The lead miner hissed, an awful sound like steam escaping from a pipe. I started moving toward the trucks, slow, keeping the lighter held up. The miners followed but stayed outside the circle of light. Jake's body lay where it had fallen. I wanted to bring him with me, but I couldn't. Had to survive first. Could mourn later. I made it to Jake's truck, got inside, locked the doors even though I knew locks wouldn't stop these things. The miners surrounded the vehicle, dozens of dead faces pressed against the Y and dows. Dead hands slapped the metal. The whole truck rocked. I tried the engine. It started. Thank God. I put it in reverse and floored it. The truck lurched backward. I felt bumps as I ran. Over bodies, or whatever these things were. They didn't seem to care. Just kept coming. I spun the wheel, put it in drive, headed down the dirt road toward the highway. In the rearview mirror, I could see them following, running now, moving way faster than dead things should be able to move. The truck hit the paved road. I pushed the gas pedal to the floor. The speedometer climbed, 40, 50, 60 miles per hour. The miners kept coming. They were impossibly fast, running at 40 miles per hour like it was nothing. But as I got further from the mine, they started to slow down. By the time I'd gone 5 miles, I couldn't see them anymore. I drove to the ranger station, burst through the door. 3 other rangers were there doing paperwork. Call the police, I said. Call the FBI, call everybody. We need help at Blackwell Mine, now. They stared at me. I realized how I must have looked. Covered in dirt and blood, 1 boot missing, eyes wild. Gabriel, what happened? That was Ron Carter, the station chief. Jake's dead. The Boy Scouts are dead. Mark's dead. There's something in that mine. Something that killed them. Slow down. Start from the beginning. I told them everything. The whole story. And I watched their faces change from concern to confusion to doubt. Gabriel, Ron said carefully, you're saying the miners from the 1847 disaster are alive? As ghosts? Not ghosts. Something else. Something that can move through rock. Something that kills. Have you been drinking? No, I'm telling you the truth. They didn't believe me. I could see it in their eyes. They thought the stress had gotten to me. Thought I'd had some kind of breakdown. The police came. They searched Blackwell Mine with a whole team. Found the 3 dead boys in the mining cart, just like I'd said. Found the collapsed tunnel. Found Jake's body in the clearing with the pickaxe wound. But they didn't find any miners. Dead or alive. The official report said Jake and I had encountered some kind of disturbed person living in the mine, a squatter or homeless person. Said this person had killed the boys and Jake, then fled into the woods. Said I'd fought off the attacker and escaped. Said we never found who did it. They welded the mine entrance shut again, put up better barriers, posted warnings, and they gave me a medal for bravery. But I know the truth. Those things are still down there, waiting, patient. They can wait forever because they're already dead. I transferred to day shift after that, office work. No more overnight patrols, no more search and rescue. I just couldn't do it anymore. Sarah brought the boys to visit me in the hospital. I'd been there 3 days for observation. Dehydration and shock, the doctor said. The boys were 12 and 10. They looked scared. Sarah looked scared too. "Dad, what really happened?" my oldest asked. I wanted to tell him, wanted to explain. But what good would it do? He'd just have nightmares for the rest of his life. "I got lost in the mine," I said. "Had a bad experience. But I'm okay now." Sarah knew I was lying. She could always tell, but she didn't push it. I went to Jake's funeral. His wife cried on my shoulder. She thanked me for trying to save him. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like I'd failed. The 3 dead boys, Tommy Martinez, Billy Foster, and Sean Murphy, had separate funerals. I went to all of them, sat in the back, listened to parents who'd lost their children ask why. What had gone wrong? Who was responsible? I couldn't give them answers. Mark's funeral was the hardest. Sarah sat up front with Mark's wife, Jennifer. After the service, Jennifer came up to me. "Mark's body was strange," she said quietly. "The mortician told me his blood was almost completely gone, like he'd been drained, but there weren't enough wounds to explain that much blood loss." I didn't know what to say. "You know something," Jennifer said. "I can see it in your eyes. What happened to my husband?" "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry." That was 2 years ago. I still work at Monongahela National Forest, but I don't go near Seneca Rocks anymore. Request different territory every time. Last month I heard something on the radio. 9 hikers went missing near an old sealed mine shaft about 40 miles north of Blackwell. The mine dated back to 1856. Similar story. Iron ore mine that collapsed, trapped workers inside. Bodies never recovered. The hikers were found 3 days later. 5 of them dead. No obvious cause of death. 4 survivors with no memory of what happened. But their eyes were different, the news report said. Darker. Like something was missing behind them. Yesterday I saw something that made my blood run cold. Government vehicles parked at the ranger station. Men in suits with Department of Interior badges asking questions. One of them had a map. Old mining maps. He was marking locations with red pins. 53 red pins across West Virginia. All of them old mines. All of them with similar histories. Cave-ins, lost miners. Bodies never recovered. "What's this about?" I asked. The man looked at me. Pattern recognition, multiple incidents across Appalachia, disappearances near sealed mining operations. We're investigating. What do you think is causing it? He didn't answer for a long moment. Then he said, "You're Gabriel Thornfield. You were involved in the Blackwell mine incident." "Yes." "In your report, you mentioned seeing something unusual. Hostiles that appeared to be the original trapped miners, moving dead." "That's right." "Did you really see that? Or was it trauma?" I looked at his map. 53 red pins, 53 old mines. How many trapped miners across all of them? Hundreds? Thousands? "I saw them," I said. "They're real, and they're still down there." The man nodded slowly. He looked tired, scared, like he already knew the answer but hoped he was wrong. "Thank you for your time, Ranger Thornfield." He left. The government vehicles drove away. I think about those miners every day, the ones who died in 1847, the ones who've been trapped in darkness for over 100 years. I think about the hatred that kind of suffering creates, the hunger, the need to drag others down into the same hell. And I think about all those other mines. 53 marked locations, maybe more that haven't been found yet, all across these mountains, all of them sealed, all of them waiting. I'm writing this down because someone needs to know. If you're reading this, if you're planning to explore old mines in Appalachia, don't. Just don't. It doesn't matter how secure the entrance looks. It doesn't matter what your guidebook says. It doesn't matter if you think you're being safe. The mines, remember. The miners, remember. And they're always hungry. Sometimes at night, I still hear that singing, that old mining song. It drifts through my dreams like smoke. And I wake up cold, hands shaking, knowing they're still down there, still waiting, still digging, forever and ever. My name is Gabriel Thornfield. I'm a park ranger, and I'm telling you this because it's the truth, every word of it. Stay out of the old mines. Please, just stay out. Stay. My name is Samuel Ironheart, and I've been a forest ranger for 20 years. I used to think I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Bears, wildcats, even the occasional crazy person living off the grid. But I was wrong. Dead wrong. It was August 1974, and the heat was killing everything in the George Washington National Forest. We hadn't seen rain in 6 weeks. The trees were so dry they cracked when the wind blew. Worst of all, fires were breaking out everywhere in Virginia. Our part of the Shenandoah Valley was like a giant matchbox waiting to explode. I'm 46 years old, and I've been alone since my wife died 3 years back. My 2 boys are grown and gone. One's a teacher down in Richmond, the other's in the Army. It's just me in these woods now, and that's how I like it. Or at least, that's how I liked it before everything went to hell. See, I used to be a wolf scientist before I became a ranger. Spent years studying how wolves hunt and live together. That's why what happened next was so impossible to believe. I knew wolves. I knew dogs. What I saw in those woods wasn't either one. The evacuation order came on August 15th. Fire was moving fast through the mountains, and everyone living in the valley had to get out. That left just us rangers and the fire crews to keep watch. The whole area was empty except for us and whatever animals were too stubborn or too scared to run. That's when the radio went quiet. Fire Captain Mike Torres and his crew were working the night shift, trying to cut a fire line near Cemetery Ridge. It's called that because there's an old Civil War graveyard up there. Lots of soldiers died in these hills back in the 1860s. The place always gave me the creeps, even in daylight. Torres was supposed to check in every hour. At 11 p.m. we got his last message. Fire line holding. We'll work through the night. After that, noth. Just static. By morning we had a helicopter in the air and search teams moving out. That's when we found their fire truck sitting right where it should be. Engine was still warm, all the equipment was there, axes, hoses, everything. But Torres and his 3 men were gone. I've seen a lot of weird things in these mountains. People get lost, people run off, people sometimes just decide they've had enough of their lives and walk away. But 4 experienced firefighters, all at once? That doesn't happen. My partner Lisa Hawthorne met me at the truck. She's our fire behavior expert. Knows how flames move and think better than anyone. She's got red hair and green eyes, and she's tough as any man I've worked with. When Lisa looked at that empty truck, her face went pale. "Sam," she said, "where did they go?" I walked around the truck looking for clues. That's when I saw them. Tracks in the dirt. Big ones. First I thought they were from a large dog, maybe a German shepherd. But they were too big. Way too big. "Maybe they had to run," Lisa said. "Maybe the fire moved faster than they thought." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But those tracks were telling a different story. They led away from the road, deeper into the forest. And there were too many of them. Like a whole pack of giant dogs had been circling the truck. That's when we heard it. A long, low howl echoing through the trees. It didn't sound like any wolf I'd ever heard. It was too deep, too human somehow. Like someone was trying to sound like a wolf but couldn't quite get it right. Lisa grabbed my arm. "What was that?" I didn't answer because I didn't know, but every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of there, to grab Lisa and run back to town and never come back to these mountains. Instead, I checked my radio and my gun. "Come on," I said. "Let's follow those tracks." We followed the tracks for 2 miles into the deep woods. The further we went, the stranger they got. At first, they looked like normal dog prints. 4 paws, claws, the right size for a really big animal. But then something weird started happening. "Sam, look at this," Lisa called out. She was kneeling next to a muddy spot by a stream. "These tracks, they're changing." She was right. The front paw prints were getting longer, more like hands. And the back ones were getting bigger, like the animal was starting to walk on 2 legs instead of 4. "That's not possible," I said, but I was looking right at it. Clear as day, the tracks showed something changing from a 4-legged animal into something that walked upright. We kept following them up a steep hill covered in thick oak trees. The air was full of smoke from the fires, making it hard to see more than 20 feet ahead. Every few minutes, we'd hear that howl again, sometimes close, sometimes far away, but always watching us. "Maybe it's just echoes," Lisa said, but her voice was shaky. "Echoes don't move around," I told her. That's when we found the first piece of clothing, a yellow firefighter's jacket, torn to pieces and hanging from a thorn bush. There was blood on it, fresh blood. Lisa picked up a scrap of the jacket. "This is Danny Walsh's. I saw him wearing it yesterday." Danny was a good kid, maybe 25 years old, had a wife and a baby at home. He was always talking about his little girl, showing everyone pictures. "Where is he, Sam?" Lisa asked. Before I could answer, we heard branches breaking in the woods ahead of us. Something big was moving through the trees, but moving wrong. Too quiet for something that size. Too careful. I pulled out my gun and motioned for Lisa to stay behind me. We crept forward until we could see into a small clearing. What we saw there made my blood freeze. There were bones scattered around a circle of rocks. Old bones, like they'd been there for years. But there were fresh ones too, and pieces of firefighter gear. Helmets, boots, pieces of clothing. All torn up like they'd been ripped apart by something with very big teeth. "Oh, God," Lisa whispered. "They're dead. They're all dead." That's when we saw the eyes, yellow eyes, glowing in the smoke like tiny suns. They were watching us from the other side of the clearing, about 6 feet off the ground, too high for a wolf, too bright for any normal animal. The eyes moved, circling around us in the smoke. I could hear footsteps, but they sounded wrong. Sometimes 4 legs, sometimes 2. Like whatever was out there couldn't decide how it wanted to walk. "Lisa," I said quietly, "when I count to 3, we run back the way we came. Don't look back. Don't stop. Just run." But before I could start counting, the thing stepped out of the smoke. It was like a wolf, but wrong in every way. It stood on 2 legs like a man, but it was covered in dark fur. Its hands had long claws, and its face was stretched out into a snout full of sharp teeth. It was at least 7 feet tall, with muscles like a bodybuilder. And it was wearing pieces of an old Civil War uniform. The thing looked right at us and smiled, actually smiled, showing all those terrible teeth. Then it spoke. "Rangers," it said in a voice like gravel. "Welcome to my territory." Lisa screamed. I raised my gun and fired 3 shots right into its chest. The bullets hit it, I know they did, but it just laughed and kept walking toward us. "Run!" I yelled. We ran like hell, crashing through the woods with that thing howling behind us. But it wasn't chasing us. It was playing with us. I could hear it following, always just out of sight, always just close enough to let us know it was there. We made it back to our truck just as the sun was going down. Lisa was crying and shaking, and I felt like I was going crazy. "What was that thing?" she kept asking. "What was that thing?" I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for sure. Torres and his crew weren't missing anymore. They were dead, and whatever killed them was still out there in the woods, waiting for dark. We should have left right then. Should have. Driven back to town and called for backup, or the army, or somebody who could deal with whatever was living in those woods. But Lisa was a scientist. and I was a ranger. We needed to understand what we were dealing with. Big mistake. We set up camp near the old cemetery on Cemetery Ridge, the one I mentioned before. Lisa thought if we could understand where the thing came from, maybe we could figure out how to stop it. The graveyard was full of weathered stone markers, most too old to read, but some of them had dates from the 1860s. This whole area was a battlefield, Lisa said, reading from an old book she'd brought. Hundreds of soldiers died here in 1863. The ground was so soaked with blood that nothing would grow for years. Great, I said. So we're camping on top of a mass grave. As soon as the sun went down, we heard them, howls coming from all around us. Not just one this time, but many. A whole pack calling to each other in the darkness. They're surrounding us, Lisa whispered. I counted at least 6 different voices. All of them too deep, too human to be real wolves. They were talking to each other, I realized. Planning something. That's when we saw the first body. Rick Morgan, one of Torres's crew, was hanging from a tree branch about 50 yards from our camp. He'd been torn apart, but not by any animal I knew. The wounds were too clean, too precise, like something with opposable thumbs had done it. We have to get out of here, Lisa said. But when we tried to start our truck, the engine wouldn't turn over. The hood was open, and all the wires had been cut. Clean cuts, like someone had used wire cutters. They did this, I said. They planned this. The howling got closer. We could see shapes moving between the trees, always staying just outside the reach of our flashlights. Sometimes on 4 legs, sometimes on 2, always watching. Lisa grabbed my arms. Monsieur, Sam, look at the graves. I turned my flashlight toward the cemetery. Half the graves had been dug up from the inside. The headstones were pushed aside, and there were holes in the ground where bodies should have been. How's that possible? Lisa asked. Before I could answer, one of them walked into our camp. It was wearing the torn remains of a Confederate uniform, gray fabric hanging in tatters from its massive frame. Its face was stretched into a wolf's snout, but its eyes were human, intelligent, angry. You should not have come here, it said in that gravelly voice. This is our place, our home. What are you? I asked, though I was pretty sure I didn't want to know the answer. We are what remains, it said. Soldiers who died in agony, cursed to walk between man and beast. The war never ended for us. More of them stepped out of the shadows, all wearing pieces of old uniforms, all standing on 2 legs like men, but shaped like wolves. Their leader, the one I'd shot earlier, was among them. We were starving when we died, the leader continued, hungry and desperate. So now we hunger always, for flesh, for blood, for new brothers to join our pack. That's when I understood. These weren't just monsters. They were the dead soldiers from the Civil War, somehow transformed into something between human and wolf. And they wanted to add to their numbers. Run, Lisa, I whispered. But there was nowhere to run. They had us completely surrounded. The leader smiled with all those terrible teeth. Which one of you wants to be first? Lisa pulled out her own gun and started shooting. I joined her, firing round after round into the pack. Some of them stumbled, some of them fell, but they all got back up. The bullets weren't killing them. The fire! Lisa shouted over the gunshots. Remember what happened to the fire? She was right. These things had appeared during the fire season. Maybe fire was the only thing that could stop them. I grabbed a flare from our emergency kit and lit it. The red flame blazed to life, and the dogmen stepped back, growling. They don't like fire, I said. Lisa grabbed another flare. Together, we started backing toward the cemetery, using the flames to keep the pack at bay. But we were running out of flares fast. That's when the leader gave a long, howling command, and the pack charged. The dogmen hit us like a tsunami of fur and teeth and claws. Lisa went down first. I heard her scream as 3 of them piled on top of her, their claws ripping through her jacket like it was paper. I fought my way toward her, swinging a burning branch like a club. The fire kept them back for a few seconds, long enough for me to see what they'd done to her. Lisa was still alive, but barely. Her throat was torn open, and there was blood everywhere. She looked up at me with those green eyes and tried to say something, but only blood came out. "You're going to be okay," I lied. "Just hold on." But the leader was standing over us now, and I could see the truth in his yellow eyes. She was dying, and there was nothing I could do about it. "She fought well," he said. "She will make a strong addition to our pack." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "Death is not the end here," he explained. "Not on this cursed ground. She will rise again when the moon is full, just like the others." He gestured toward the open graves, just like we did, over 100 years ago. I looked around the cemetery and finally understood. These weren't just random soldiers who had died in battle. This was where they'd buried the ones who were bitten by something before they died, the ones who came back wrong. "A Confederate witch cursed this battlefield," the leader continued. "Any who die here in violence will rise again as we have, forever hungry, forever hunting." Lisa's eyes were getting glassy. Her breathing was shallow and fast. I held her hand as tight as I could. "I'm sorry," I whispered to her. "I'm so sorry I brought you here." She squeezed my hand once, then her eyes closed for the last time. The leader knelt down beside her body. "3 nights," he said. "When the moon is full, she will wake, and she will be hungry." That's when I snapped. I don't remember everything that happened next, but I know I fought like a crazy man. I had 1 flare left, and I used it to set fire to everything I could reach. The dry grass, the old wooden crosses, even some of the dogmen themselves. They howled and scattered as the flames spread, but I could tell they weren't really hurt. Just angry. The leader grabbed me by the throat and lifted me off the ground. His claws dug into my neck, and I could feel my blood running down my chest. "You will join us," he growled. "Tonight." He opened his mouth wide, going for my throat. I could see all the way down to his stomach, could smell the rotting meat on his breath. But then something amazing happened. The wind shifted, and the fire I'd started spread to the forest around us. Suddenly, everything was burning. The dogmen started howling in panic, not anger. They dropped me and ran toward the deeper woods, away from the flames. "Fire!" I yelled after them. "You're afraid of fire!" The leader looked back at me from the edge of the cemetery. "This is not over, Ranger. We know where you live. We know where you work. You cannot run from us forever." Then they disappeared into the smoke and darkness, leaving me alone with Lisa's body and the burning forest. I picked her up and carried her toward the road, praying that someone would find us before the fire got too big or the dogmen came back. Just before dawn, I heard the helicopter coming. They found me on the main road carrying Lisa's body and babbling about dogmen and Civil War curses. The helicopter crew thought I was in shock from the smoke. They flew us both to the hospital in Harrison Butte. The official report said that Fire Captain Torres and his crew died when their equipment malfunctioned during the forest fire. Lisa Hawthorne died from injuries sustained during the evacuation. I was treated for smoke inhalation and released. Nobody believed my story about the dogmen. Why would they? I wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. But I know the truth. I quit the Forest Service 2 weeks later and moved down to Richmond to be near my son. I got a job at a hardware store and tried to forget about the mountains. But you can't forget something like that. Not really. Lisa never came back. I went to her funeral and watched them put her in the ground at Riverside Cemetery, 20 miles from Cemetery Ridge. Maybe the curse only works on that specific battlefield. Maybe she found peace. But sometimes, when the moon is full, I dream about her. In the dreams, she's standing at the edge of the woods behind my house, and her eyes are yellow instead of green. She calls my name, but when I try to go to her, she disappears. I still follow the news from the George Washington National Forest. Every fire season, there are reports of missing hikers and campers, people who go into the woods and never come out. The authorities always blame bears or getting lost, but I know better. The dogmen are still out there, still hungry, still looking for new members to add to their pack. I tried to warn people. I wrote letters to the Forest Service, to newspapers, to anyone who would listen. But who's going to believe a crazy old man talking about werewolves and Civil War curses? So I'm telling you instead. If you ever find yourself in the Shenandoah Valley during fire season, stay away from Cemetery Ridge. Stay away from any part of the forest where battles were fought. And if you hear howling in the night that sounds too human to be wolves, don't go looking for the source. Just run. Because once the dogmen know you're there, they'll never stop hunting you. They have all the time in the world, and they're very, very patient. I'm 61 years old now, and my hair is white as snow. But I still check my locks twice every night before bed. I still keep a shotgun loaded with silver bullets in my closet. And I still jump every time I hear a dog howl after dark. The war between the states ended in 1865. But for some soldiers, the fighting never stops. They're still out there in the mountains, wearing their tattered uniforms and carrying their eternal hunger. And they're always recruiting new troops. Rangers, this is why we carry silver bullets in Appalachia. Because sometimes, the old stories are true. My name is Samuel Ironheart, and this is my warning to you all.